Across every continent, colossal monuments and enigmatic artifacts stand as silent witnesses to eras of unexplained brilliance. These were moments when humanity appeared to leap forward only to fall abruptly into silence. The precision of the Egyptian pyramids, or the ancient ability to chart eclipses and map the stars, suggests knowledge far beyond their era. Again and again, advanced cultures, from the Maya to the builders of Göbekli Tepe, rose to remarkable heights before collapsing or burying their achievements. Why did such progress end so suddenly? These enduring mysteries challenge our historical timeline and force us to ask whether a deeper truth about the ancient world still lies hidden. This giant snake rock has long been known as one of the most bewildering stone formations in the archaeological world, for it resembles a massive serpent winding across the ground as if frozen mid-slither. Its almost impossibly accurate shape makes many people refuse to believe it is merely a product of natural weathering. The head of the rock swells outward with curves that evoke the sense of a jaw, a snout, and even faint impressions of eye sockets. The body tapers smoothly, bending with a softness that geologists describe as rare in naturally eroded formations, as though an invisible hand sculpted it with intention. The more one observes it, the more striking its symmetry becomes, along with the linear grooves running along its length, like reptilian scales, reinforcing the impression of a petrified creature. Yet despite the morphological details that fuel heated debate, the greatest mystery lies in one factor that weakens every hypothesis. No one knows when this rock first appeared. No method can determine its true age, and no historical records mention it in either ancient or medieval periods. What do you think about this snake-like shape, purely natural or crafted by human hands? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Determining the age of this giant snake rock has become an almost insurmountable barrier for researchers, as every conventional dating method fails completely. The rock contains no organic material, making carbon dating impossible. The surrounding sediment layers, once expected to offer clues, have been eroded by wind for centuries, erasing all traces that could indicate its formation period. Microscopic analysis of the surface also reveals no cut marks, chisel traces, or tool impressions, leaving the human-crafted hypothesis in uncertainty. If people created it, who were they, in what era did they live, and why would they leave no trace at all? Yet the natural formation theory is no easier to accept, because producing such symmetry and serpent-like curvature through erosion would require tens of thousands of years under extremely specific environmental conditions. The complete absence of cultural, historical, or geological markers makes the rock feel like an object cleaned by time, standing alone, with no starting point for humans to trace back. This void of chronology has turned it into one of archaeology's most frustrating mysteries, a question with no foundation to build an answer upon. The ambiguity surrounding the age of this giant snake rock has created a vast space for countless conflicting hypotheses, each of which, when examined closely, seems to contradict itself. Some researchers suggest that the rock may have belonged to an indigenous civilization that disappeared before recorded history. Their argument relies on old legends describing a sacred serpent that guarded the land and its water sources, implying that the rock might once have served as a ritual symbol or sacred object. However, upon closer inspection, it becomes clear that these stories appeared relatively late and cannot prove the existence of a culture capable of constructing large-scale stone monuments. On the other hand, geologists attempt to explain the formation from a natural perspective, theorizing that the rock may simply be a remnant of a larger boulder, fractured and gradually sculpted by wind and water. Yet even they must admit that the symmetry, the softness of its curves, and the distinctly serpentine morphology are extremely difficult to account for through ordinary weathering processes. In the end, all hypotheses, whether archaeological, mythological, or geological collide with the same impasse without knowing when the rock was formed, every argument rests on speculation and cannot stand as a credible explanation. Its indeterminate age not only obstructs classification, but also undermines all attempts to reconstruct its historical context. In archaeology, the origin of an object is tied to key questions: which culture created it, for what purpose, in what era. But with this giant snake rock, none of these questions can be answered. Without knowing the century of its creation, comparative analysis becomes impossible. There are no matching stylistic elements. It resembles neither Neolithic standing stones, nor the zoomorphic sculptures of the Olmecs, nor the serpent mounds of ancient America, nor any symbolic tradition of nearby cultures. The rock appears as a time-lost object, something standing in a landscape that does not belong to its story, without a timeline to anchor itself to. Some bold researchers suggest that the exposed portion of the rock is merely the tip of an iceberg, part of a massive structure that has been buried by time. They envision the serpent's body continuing deep underground, forming a vast ceremonial monument of which only the head remains visible today. But this hypothesis raises even more difficult questions. If such a large-scale construction ever existed, why has almost the entire structure disappeared while the head remains nearly intact? If this was once a ritual site, why is there no trace of habitation, no ash, no tools, and no related artifacts anywhere in the surrounding area? Every archaeological attempt ends at the same impasse without a definable age. To begin with, the idea of a buried monument remains forever in the realm of speculation. The passage of time erasing all traces has turned this giant snake rock into fertile ground for mystical interpretations. Some believe the stone is evidence of giant serpent species that once dominated the earth, such as Titanoboa, a creature whose very image is enough to send chills down the spine. Others view it as a symbol of ancient deities connected to water-earth or rebirth, since serpent imagery holds sacred significance in many cultures. There are also those who argue that the rock is the legacy of a lost civilization, one that possessed a unique stone crafting technique unknown to recorded history. Yet no matter how captivating or romantic these theories may sound, they all share the same fundamental limitation: as long as the true age of the rock remains an absolute mystery, every explanation rests solely on speculation. A school of thought suggests that its appeal lies precisely in its lack of a definable starting point. If archaeologists discovered it to be only a few hundred years old, or if it were proven to belong to a well-known local culture, its aura of mystery would vanish instantly. But standing in a liminal state, neither ancient nor modern, neither natural nor undoubtedly man-made, the rock symbolizes the limits of human knowledge and the vastness of time. A silent object withholding its secrets often captivates us more than any grand monument with well-documented origins. Today, this giant snake rock continues to attract archaeologists, explorers, and enthusiasts of ancient mysteries. Each visitor arrives with a different question, yet all leave with the same lingering feeling, as if they have touched a fragment of a nameless era. The rock does not speak, clarify, or justify its existence. It simply remains, and that wordless presence is what makes it impossible to resolve. When an object has no identifiable beginning, it becomes infinite in the human imagination. High Brazil Island, one of the most persistent enigmas of Atlantic legends, is described as a place that seems both real and unreal, hovering between geography and mythology. What makes it so different, and what has kept its allure alive for centuries, is the recurring claim that it is an island that appears only once every 7 years, like a hazy doorway that opens and closes according to some unknown cosmic rule humanity has never been able to explain. Numerous sailors, fishermen, and explorers from Ireland between the 14th and 19th centuries insisted that they saw High Brazil rising from the ocean mist, clear and vivid like a genuine landmass, but only for a brief moment before vanishing again. The strange part is that these accounts, despite coming from different eras, social backgrounds, and contexts, share a remarkably consistent description. The island is round its coastline, gently sloping, sometimes seemingly divided by a central channel, and always wrapped in an unbroken veil of mist. The fact that so many people reported seeing the same shape, yet modern science finds nothing in that region, only deepens High Brazil's status as a mystery that defies all rational theories. What do you think about an island that appears only once every 7 years? Is it a natural phenomenon or something beyond our understanding? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In numerous medieval European maps, High Brazil appears clearly to the west of Ireland, as if it were an unquestionable geographic feature. The Catalan Atlas, the Pizzigano brothers' map of 1430, and many nautical charts from the 14th to 16th centuries depict it with surprising detail. This puzzled researchers why would medieval cartographers known for their discipline and reliance on actual maritime knowledge uniformly accept the existence of an island that modern surveys have never confirmed? If only 1 or 2 maps showed High Brazil, it could be dismissed as an error or a rumor. But with so many maps drawing it almost identically, it suggests that people of the past genuinely believed the island was real. That belief likely came from repeated seafaring experiences in which sailors glimpsed a strange landmass that appeared only under certain atmospheric conditions, often involving fog mirages and great distance. One of the most controversial accounts comes from the 17th century, when Captain John Nisbet claimed his crew had landed on High Brazil. According to his story, they encountered mysterious inhabitants, including an old man who guided them through a stone-built city with architecture unlike anything in Europe. The old man supposedly offered them gold and silver before letting them return to their ship. The tale has never been verified, no physical evidence was ever recovered, and many consider it a fictionalized sailor's yarn. Yet the troubling part remains the island's terrain. Its sudden appearance and its equally sudden disappearance all match countless unrelated accounts from other periods. This repetition makes High Brazil feel less like a fantasy and more like a phenomenon, one that people across centuries genuinely believed they had witnessed. The Fata Morgana hypothesis is considered one of the most reasonable attempts to explain why generations of sailors claim to have seen High Brazil rising from the ocean. This optical phenomenon occurs when layers of warm and cold air stack in unusual patterns, bending light so strongly that distant landmasses appear stretched, elevated, and distorted into the shape of a floating island. On days with exceptionally stable atmospheric conditions, sailors might see the silhouette of Ireland's coastline, or a far-off rocky ridge looming as a faint circular mass, remarkably similar to descriptions of High Brazil. However, what makes this hypothesis incomplete is the island's 7-year appearance cycle consistently recorded in folklore. Optical illusions do not follow a fixed schedule, nor do they repeat predictably over centuries. This contradiction leads some to believe that such rare atmospheric conditions may have been so infrequent that ancient observers mistook them for a cyclical event, passing it down as one of the ocean's mysterious laws. Some scholars believe that High Brazil may once have been the exposed peak of an underwater plateau rising above the ocean's surface during a unique climatic period before sinking permanently. If this were true, the island should have left behind clear geological traces, submerged ridges, remnants of ancient volcanic activity, or eroded sediment layers. Yet modern seafloor surveys in the area where old maps placed the island have revealed no such structures. The entire region is a flat bed of rock, showing no signs of ever having risen high enough to form an island. This complete absence of physical evidence makes the geological hypothesis increasingly fragile and strengthens the idea that High Brazil may have been nothing more than a phantom island, something seen by human eyes but never truly present in the physical world. In Irish and Celtic tradition, High Brazil is considered a sacred land similar to Avalon or Tir na Nog, a place where people do not age, never get sick, and live in endless abundance. These legends describe the island as perpetually hidden behind mists opening only to the worthy. And strangely, mist is also the defining feature of almost every maritime account of the island. High Brazil seems to exist simultaneously in two realms, a physical one that sailors try to reach, and a spiritual one that Irish mythology reserves for chosen individuals. This dual identity strengthens its mystique, blurring the line between geography and myth. In the 20th century, the mystery of High Brazil was unexpectedly revived when it appeared in the famous Rendlesham Forest UFO incident. A serviceman claimed he had encountered a strange light and received a sequence of binary code directly transmitted into his mind. When decoded, the sequence matched the coordinates found on ancient maps of High Brazil. Although no solid evidence supports the claim, this coincidence led many to wonder whether High Brazil was truly just a lost island or something connected to phenomena far beyond human understanding. The Rendlesham incident, as a result, added even more fuel to a mystery that had already endured for centuries. Today, High Brazil remains undiscovered. No geological traces, no artifacts, no archaeological evidence. Yet it persists, not in physical form, but through the remarkable consistency of its legends. An island recorded for hundreds of years, appearing on numerous maps described similarly by witnesses who lived centuries apart, and always tied to the baffling claim of a 7-year cycle. If it were a natural phenomenon, why would it obey such a schedule? If it were a mirage, why would its shape remain so consistent? And if it were myth, why would it spread so widely in maritime culture? High Brazil, real or not, has lived vividly in human imagination, reminding us that the world still holds shadows untouched by certainty, places where the boundary between reality and illusion is thin enough that a single wisp of fog can erase them. Among the countless treasures discovered inside the tomb of Tutankhamun, many objects amazed archaeologists with their artistic mastery and spiritual depth. Yet within this vast collection, one artifact stood apart, something that seemed to belong to a ritual tradition far beyond the understanding of modern humans. This was the Anubis Shrine, the mysterious wooden chest topped with a reclining statue of Anubis, often described by scholars as the most sealed door of ancient Egyptian religion. Despite decades of research, debate, and reanalysis over the past century, the shrine continues to hold unanswered questions, especially the greatest one. What was it truly created for? What do you think the Anubis Shrine was truly created for? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The statue of Anubis on top of the shrine was carved in a fully reclined posture, a position extremely rare in Egyptian art. Most deities stood upright, sat in an authoritative pose, or appeared in relief form. But this Anubis looks a live body lowered to the surface of the shrine, ears upright, eyes, watching anyone who dares approach. It does not feel like an artistic composition, but rather a state of vigilance with a functional purpose. The statue is not merely symbolic, it resembles a guardian, a creature of the afterlife waiting to fulfill its duty. The materials used to craft the Anubis Shrine make its mystery even deeper. The shrine is built from wood coated with black resin, yet its surface is polished to an almost flawless smoothness, more reminiscent of modern tools than techniques from 3,000 years ago. The internal joints fit together with millimeter precision, showing no gaps, suggesting that the artisan had exceptional knowledge of wood behavior and knew how to treat it so it would not warp over time. The black coating was not merely decorative, it provided moisture resistance and protection, indicating a highly advanced technical process. This extraordinary level of craftsmanship has led many experts to believe that the shrine could not have been a simple container, but rather an object created for a secret ritual known only to the most powerful members of the priesthood. What puzzled archaeologists further was the unusual combination of symbols on the shrine. Motifs associated with Anubis, god of mummification and protector of souls, were abundant. But alongside them appeared symbolism linked to Seth, the god of chaos, storms, and the desert. Egyptians rarely placed Anubis and Seth in the same context, yet the shrine displays both layered together. Additionally, certain elements correspond to Osiris, the god of resurrection. This led researchers to hypothesize that the shrine served in a transformative ritual, one guiding the soul from chaos, Seth, to preservation, Anubis, and ultimately to rebirth, Osiris. But this remains only speculation. The placement of the Anubis shrine inside Tutankhamun's tomb is one of the details that perplexes archaeologists the most. Instead of being positioned at the head of the coffin or near the passage guiding the soul into the duat, as tradition dictates, the shrine stands alone in a narrow corridor facing an unadorned dark wall. This arrangement directly contradicts Egyptian ritual norms, where the position of every object carries clear spiritual meaning. Placing a reclining Anubis statue in such an enclosed space has led many scholars to believe this could not have been accidental. It resembles an invisible checkpoint, where Anubis not only protects the king, but also blocks a form of energy or spirit that was not meant to pass through. If this interpretation is correct, a far greater question emerges. What lies beyond that wall that compelled the ancients to station a divine guardian in such a deliberate position? When archaeologists opened the shrine, they did not find jewelry or precious metals. Instead, they discovered a set of objects with powerful ritual significance: amulets, mysterious oils, scroll fragments with unusual symbols, linen bands used in ceremonies, and several items whose purpose remains unknown. This assortment led many to believe the shrine was a repository of magical implements used in the mummification process or rituals guiding the king's soul into the afterlife. Yet placing all these objects inside a chest, guarded by Anubis, suggests they were connected to a ritual not recorded in any surviving texts. These items were not decorative, they had a function. But what function? Adding to the mystery was an inscription carved on the shrine, a rare warning stating that anyone who disturbed the place would face the guardian of the dead. Egyptians seldom engraved such direct threats on ritual objects. This served as a spiritual barrier, a protective seal, preventing the living from interfering with the journey of the dead. The reclining Anubis atop the shrine reinforces the message: this is a sacred object not meant to be touched by mortals. The true function of the Anubis shrine remains an unanswered question, and this very ambiguity makes it one of the most challenging mysteries in Egyptology. Decades of debate have produced no hypothesis strong enough to convince the entire scholarly community. Some researchers believe the shrine was simply a ritual storage chest holding the tools needed to prepare the king's soul for the afterlife. Yet if it were only that, why was it crafted with such nearly perfect precision? Why place a statue of Anubis on top, in a vigilant posture, as if guarding the threshold between life and death? And why is the shrine positioned so unusually within the tomb, ignoring every known ritual convention? A bolder theory suggests the shrine was a ritual gateway symbolizing the moment when the soul transitions out of the human world. The reclining Anubis acts as the gatekeeper, guarding the passage between two realms. The mysterious items inside may have served as guides or protective tools for the soul as it encountered challenges in the duat. If this is true, the shrine held not just physical objects, but metaphysical significance, a marker of a ritual that modern humans cannot reconstruct because the priestly knowledge behind it has long vanished. Another explanation proposes that the shrine was a spiritual seal created to prevent chaotic forces, especially those associated with Seth, from interfering with Tutankhamun's spiritual journey. This may clarify why the symbols of Seth, Anubis, and Osiris appear together, a triad representing chaos, protection, and rebirth. Yet if the shrine truly functioned as a seal, what exactly was being sealed within or beyond it? And why were the ancient Egyptians so cautious that they crafted a ritual structure unlike anything found in any other tomb? These questions remain unanswered, leaving the Anubis shrine standing as a closed door of Egyptology, a mystery that even the most knowledgeable scholars can only graze the surface of, while its true essence continues to lie dormant in 3,000 years of shadow. Paradoxically, after more than a century of study, the answer remains out of reach. No ancient text describes a similar shrine. No ritual manuscripts correspond to it. No structure in any other tomb mirrors its design. This leads many experts to believe the Anubis shrine may have been a unique ritual created solely for Tutankhamun, or an artifact produced during a turbulent period when rituals were being adapted, altered, or guarded as priestly secrets. All these elements make the Anubis shrine one of the most impenetrable enigmas of modern Egyptology. Its true purpose, whether a ritual chest, a spiritual seal, a transition chamber, or something entirely different, remains hidden, protected by the very image of Anubis resting atop it. A small artifact, yet one that opens a doorway into a spiritual world we still do not fully understand. Beneath the dry, cracked earth of Gujarat, where the sun scorches the sky with relentless burning heat, lie structures that stop modern visitors in their tracks. Massive underground stepwells plunging deep into the earth like gateways to another world. No one knows exactly who designed them, and no one can explain how ancient builders managed to dig tens of meters down while carving perfectly straight corridors, flawless pillars, and an architectural system so complex it challenges even modern engineering. These stepwells are far more than reservoirs. They are architectural labyrinths, inverted towers etched into the ground, and one of the deepest mysteries Indian archaeology has ever confronted. What do you think? How did ancient builders create such deep and perfectly engineered structures without modern tools? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What astonishes people the most, and what forms the core mystery surrounding the stepwells of Gujarat, is their extraordinarily complex underground staircase architecture, extending from the surface down tens of meters into solid stone. These are not simple staircases, but multi-layered structures interconnected by hundreds of pillars, beams, arches, corridors, open courtyards, and light shafts, all arranged with remarkable precision. Imagine this 1,000 years ago, without drills, without laser measurements, without design. Software, ancient builders dug so deep that sunlight barely reaches the upper levels, yet they created structures durable enough to last millennia. The sheer depth of Gujarat's stepwells continues to astonish archaeologists. Some structures, such as the famed Rani Ki Vav, descend tens of meters and are meticulously decorated from the uppermost level all the way to the bottom. Every tier features stone pillars, carved figures, and detailed reliefs arranged with such precision that it feels as though a complete architectural blueprint once existed, despite no technical documents ever being found. To build something both deep and expansive, ancient craftsmen had to understand load distribution, construct support systems, control shifting soil, and prevent collapses throughout the excavation. And yet after centuries of floods, erosion, and even being buried under mud for long periods, these layers of stone still stand firm. When finally uncovered, they appeared almost untouched, as if time itself had been rendered powerless. For this reason, many stepwells resemble underground palaces, a concept difficult to imagine even in the modern age. Researchers often describe them as inverted temples' architectural forms expanding downward instead of upward, the exact opposite of how towers or shrines are usually built. Instead of building toward the sky, ancient engineers chose to build downward, creating one of the most unusual architectural traditions in human history. As you descend into the deeper levels of a stepwell, the sudden change in the air is impossible to ignore. Above, the heat of Gujarat is harsh and relentless, yet just a few dozen steps below, the temperature drops noticeably and a thin layer of cool humidity settles over the space. The multi-tiered structure, along with skylights and corridors positioned at precise angles, creates a natural airflow that keeps the interior cool throughout the year. This raises a profound question. How did ancient builders understand wind patterns, humidity, shade, and light well enough to optimize every detail? Nothing in the architecture is accidental, from the inclination of the stairs to the placement of openings and the way each level intersects. All of it reflects a mastery of aerodynamics and microclimate engineering that seems to have vanished from history. The mystery deepens even further when examining the carvings inside the stepwells. In the lowest levels, where sunlight can barely reach the walls, and pillars are still covered with extraordinarily intricate designs, mythological figures, floral motifs, human forms and animals, all rendered with such sharp detail that they look almost modern. The puzzling part is this ancient artisans worked under extreme low-light conditions. At such depths, only faint rays from the skylights above reach the stone, far too weak to allow the carving of tiny details like folds of clothing, jewelry patterns, or facial expressions. A theory once suggested that mirrors were used to direct light downward, but no archaeological evidence has ever confirmed it. Using oil lamps is equally problematic, as there are no traces of soot anywhere on the stone surfaces. This has led researchers to admit that the lighting techniques employed by these ancient craftsmen remain beyond our current understanding. Beyond water storage, many stepwells show strong ritual significance. Some resemble underground temples. Scholars believe the act of descending the steps symbolized a spiritual journey from light into darkness, from the living world into the sacred realm, from the earthly plane into the depths where water, the source of life, was honored like a deity. This interpretation aligns with Indian cultural symbolism, where water represents purification and rebirth. Yet a major question lingers. Why place a temple underground in a humid, dark, hard-to-reach place? If it was merely ritualistic, why build such extremely complex architecture? Another puzzle is the distribution of stepwells. Although India is vast and other regions share similar climates, the most elaborate stepwells appear almost exclusively in Gujarat and Rajasthan. No definitive explanation exists. Some scholars suggest that local geology made it easy to dig deep without collapse. But if this knowledge was so advanced, why is there no surviving technical documentation? Where did this knowledge come from? And why did it disappear? Some stepwells are so deep that archaeologists cannot determine their original bottom. Many lower levels are filled with mud-collapsed corridors or sealed passageways. No one knows whether there were additional ceremonial chambers or tunnels extending further underground. This uncertainty adds to their dual identity, both practical and sacred, familiar yet alien. One of the most remarkable aspects of the stepwells is the construction technique in which tightly fitted stone blocks are assembled without the use of any binding mortar. The stones were cut with such precision that once placed together, they lock themselves into a stable structure that is both water-resistant and resistant to collapse. What makes this even more astonishing is that the entire process took place deep underground, in confined spaces where controlling angles, pressure, and support points becomes far more difficult than in open-air construction. How the ancient builders calculated load-bearing positions, lateral pressure distribution, and the overall structural balance of each tier remains a subject of study for modern engineers. especially since no ancient architectural plans have ever been found to explain their methods. The case of Rani Ki Vav stunned the world. Once buried by shifting waters of the Saraswati River, it remained hidden for centuries. But when excavated in the 20th century, its carvings, pillars, and stairways were astonishingly intact, as though protected from time itself. This remarkable preservation suggests that the builders possessed technical expertise far beyond what we typically attribute to the era. Today, the stepwells of Gujarat stand silent and majestic. They do not shout their greatness. They simply endure, reminding us that ancient civilizations may have possessed advanced knowledge that later vanished. Standing at the rim and looking down into the dim, descending tiers feels like staring into an unsolved equation. Each step, a clue, each pillar, a question, the entire structure, an open-ended enigma. The stepwells do not simply store water. They preserve the intellect of a civilization, and more importantly, they preserve a question humanity has never answered. How did ancient people carve tens of meters into the earth, construct such complex inverted architecture, and make it last for thousands of years? To this day, the question lingers. Like the shadowed staircases themselves, the deeper you go, the greater the mystery becomes. When looking at the Yungang grottos, one feels as if standing before an epic carved into stone. A chapter not only grand in scale, but astonishing in artistic sophistication that far surpasses what we usually associate with the 5th century. Located in Datong, China, the Yungang grottos stretch across the sandstone cliffs with more than 250 caves, housing over 40,000 Buddha statues and countless reliefs. Each sculpture carries its own story, its own expression, its own spiritual breath, shaped by the cultural exchanges between East and West. Yet what makes Yungang truly mysterious is not just its beauty, but the fact that no one truly knows who created these masterpieces. In the history of world art, few monumental works achieve such perfection, while leaving behind no written trace of their creators. Why do you think a monumental site like Yungang left behind no names of the artisans who created it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. During the Northern Wei period, the imperial court is known to have sponsored the construction of the Yungang grottos, but historical records only describe imperial intentions, offering absolutely no detailed information about the artisans. We know they existed, we know they worked tirelessly for decades, and we know they created sculptures so refined that even modern craftsmen are astonished. Yet their identities, their names, origins, organizational structure, training system, and even their numbers have vanished as if they never existed. No artisan lists, no engraved signatures, no construction journals, no guild records, and not a single direct clue indicating where these craftsmen came from. This turns Yungang into a paradox, a colossal work created by a workforce erased from history. Gaps in historical records force scholars to construct various hypotheses to explain the origins of the craftsmen who created Yungang. Some researchers believe most artisans were Chinese, working directly under the Northern Wei court, a dynasty well known for using religious art to reinforce political authority. Yet upon closer examination, the sculptural style at Yungang reveals something far more unusual. The Greco-Indian influence of Gandharan art, the idealized softness characteristic of the Gupta tradition, and motifs reminiscent of Central Asian nomadic cultures. Such a deep fusion seems to exceed the boundaries of a purely local artisan group. It suggests the possibility that Yungang once gathered sculptors from multiple cultural regions along the Silk Road, a corridor where religion, trade, and art intertwined intensely during the 5th century. However, all of these remain only conjectures, because no surviving document records the Northern Wei court hiring or receiving foreign artisans, leaving the true identities of the carvers one of the greatest unresolved mysteries of Yungang. As we look at the immense scale of Yungang, the disappearance of its artisans becomes even more perplexing. To create more than 40,000 statues, There must have been a highly complex labor system, rough cutters shaping the initial blocks, fine carvers detailing the figures, decorative artists, polishers refining the surfaces, designers planning the overall layout, and religious supervisors ensuring each sculpture followed proper doctrinal standards. A project of such magnitude should have generated extensive administrative records, worker lists, progress logs, management documents, yet almost none of these survive. Some believe the records were lost to war, others suggest that the court deliberately erased artisans' names to emphasize that the monument belonged solely to the state and religion. Still others theorize that many workers were slaves or war captives whose identities were never intended to be documented. But all these ideas remain speculation because no explanation convincingly accounts for the complete disappearance of hundreds, perhaps even thousands of individuals, the very people who contributed to one of the greatest stone masterpieces in human history. When examining each statue at Yungang closely, we begin to see a level of craftsmanship that seems almost impossible to explain by the standards of the 5th century. The folds of the robes fall softly like real silk, and the gentle transitions of light across the faces give the impression that the statues are breathing under the sunlight. Patterns only a few millimeters wide remain sharply defined after 15 centuries of weathering, a phenomenon that almost contradicts the fragile, easily eroded nature of sandstone. Some specialists believe the ancient artisans may have used a unique surface treatment technique, perhaps a form of polishing or protective coating that we have yet to rediscover. If this theory is true, their skill was not merely refined, but nearly miraculous, far surpassing what archaeologists previously imagined possible for that era. And because of this, the central question becomes even more unsettling. Why have the individuals capable of such extraordinary mastery vanished completely from the historical record? The unfinished caves of Yungang offer a rare window into the working process of its anonymous artisans. In many chambers, the statues remain only roughly outlined, marked by broad, unrefined chisel strokes that never progressed to the intricate detailing seen elsewhere. This reveals a highly structured workflow, beginning with the shaping of the basic mass, followed by intermediate refinement, and finally the carving of fine details. Such a layered technical system reflects a large, organized labor force functioning almost like an industrial art workshop of the ancient world. Yet these very unfinished traces only deepen the mystery. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of individuals once worked relentlessly here, their chisels echoing through the stone corridors, and still history has preserved not a single name. How could a workforce of such magnitude vanish completely from humanity's memory? Some modern scholars have reviewed surviving Northern Way texts, hoping to find clues, but the texts only recount imperial policies, religious motives, and political intentions behind Buddhist constructions. Not a single line describes master sculptors, nor how the imperial court selected labor for the project. Logic dictates that a monumental site like Yungang must have had a chief designer or master architect, someone who oversaw the entire layout and direction. Yet this person is also completely missing from historical memory. Even local folklore offers no reliable detail. Stories mention mysterious craftsmen from the West, wandering sculptors who worked only at night, or wandering artists traveling the Silk Road. But such tales reflect not facts, rather the natural response of a community confronted with a monumental work created by people they never knew. Folklore grows where history falls silent. The deeper we investigate Yungang, the clearer it becomes that its greatest mystery is not its size, its stylistic fusion, or its technical excellence. The true enigma lies in the absolute silence surrounding its sculptors. Everything, the craftsmanship, the scale, the artistic unity, implies that these were masters of their craft, and yet history did not preserve even a whisper of their existence. In the end, the Yungang grottos stand as a breathtaking paradox, a timeless masterpiece created by utterly anonymous hands. They transformed stone into soul, yet allowed their own names to fade into dust. And so, for 15 centuries, the artisans of Yungang have remained among the most mysterious figures in human history. Individuals who carved a civilization into stone, only to vanish completely from humanity's memory. In the archaeological history of Africa, few symbols are as puzzling and captivating as the great Zimbabwe stone birds, strange carvings that resemble no known bird species still existing in the natural world. They are not merely artistic artifacts, but the core of a mystery surrounding the civilization that built the Great Zimbabwe Complex, a powerful center that flourished from the 11th to the 15th century. What makes these stone birds mysterious is that they appear in extremely limited numbers. Only 8 statues were recorded, yet they became so important that they now serve as a national emblem of modern Zimbabwe. The paradox, however, is that neither the people of Zimbabwe today nor archaeologists can determine their original purpose, meaning, or true creators. What do you think made these stone birds so important that they became a national symbol? Even though their origins remain completely unknown, share your thoughts in the comments below. The stone birds of Great Zimbabwe astonish researchers not only because of their ancient age, but also because their craftsmanship surpasses anything typically found in the region during the same era. Although carved from soapstone, a relatively soft material, the statues possess remarkable sharpness, refinement, and near-perfect symmetry, suggesting that the artisans had skills or tools far more advanced than what current archaeological evidence indicates. The decorative grooves are carved with striking precision. The edges are unusually smooth, and the feet of the birds stand upon intricately adorned stone pillars, giving the impression of an artistic tradition that had reached a sophisticated peak. Even more perplexing is their form. The heads resemble raptors, yet the bodies are unnaturally elongated, creating a hybrid creature somewhere between eagle-hawk and a figure that feels almost metaphysical. This strange combination raises the question of whether the birds were meant to depict real animals or represent a ritual, mythological, or sacred entity believed in by the ancient creators. All these elements together turn the mystery of the artisans and the true meaning behind their unusual design into one of the most enduring questions surrounding Great Zimbabwe. Archaeological records indicate that there were originally 8 stone bird statues, yet only 7 survive today. And this missing piece has become one of the most challenging mysteries of Great Zimbabwe. No one knows when it disappeared, whether it was buried, destroyed, or taken during the colonial era. Some theories suggest it may have belonged to a separate structure and was never recovered. Others believe it was stolen and subsequently lost without a trace. The absence of this crucial piece makes every attempt to reconstruct the original spatial arrangement uncertain, because the loss of even one statue could distort the entire ceremonial layout. The missing bird therefore stands as the largest gap in the effort to decode the enigma of Great Zimbabwe. The core of the mystery and the most significant element lies in the very locations where the statues were discovered. The stone birds were not scattered randomly throughout the ancient city. Instead, they appeared concentrated in the 2 most important political and ceremonial zones of Great Zimbabwe, the Great Enclosure, and the Hill Complex. These areas are considered the heart of the civilization's political, religious, and social structure. The Great Enclosure, with its massive stone walls and enigmatic circular architecture, may have served as a ceremonial space or a restricted area reserved for the ruling elite. Meanwhile, the Hill Complex, positioned on the highest elevation of the site, bears traces of even older rituals, possibly connected to ancestor worship or rites of political transition. The fact that all stone birds were found exclusively in these 2 zones deepens the mystery of their purpose. If they were mere decorative objects, they would likely appear in multiple areas of the city. Instead, they were placed only in locations accessible to the elite. This has led researchers to suggest that the birds may have served a ritual role, acted as symbols of authority, or functioned as intermediaries between rulers and ancestral spirits. Some oral traditions of the Shona people, a culture linked to Great Zimbabwe, describe birds as ancestral symbols, protective spirits, or guides between the visible and invisible worlds. However, the largest obstacle to interpretation is that Great Zimbabwe left behind no written records to confirm any meaning. There are no inscriptions, no decoded symbols, no ritual documents. All that remain are the silent stone birds standing on their pedestals, solemn and enigmatic. One of the most frequently discussed theories suggests that the stone birds once served as symbols of supreme authority for the ruling elite of Great Zimbabwe. Their presence exclusively in areas considered political and ceremonial centers strongly supports this idea. The layout of the hill complex, with its fortified walls, isolated chambers, and traces of ancestral rituals, indicates that it may have hosted significant ceremonial events. Some scholars believe the stone birds were used in cyclical rites linked to harvests, succession, or symbolic communication with deceased kings. If this interpretation is correct, the statues were far more than decorative objects. They were sacred emblems of sovereign power held only by the leadership class. Some scholars believe that the stone birds may have played a role in astronomical observations, rather than serving purely ceremonial purposes. Certain grooves and orientations found on the statues and structures within the hill complex appear intentionally arranged, suggesting they may have marked solar positions, seasonal changes, or other important cyclical events. However, this theory faces a major obstacle. The original archaeological context was heavily disrupted during the colonial era. Many statues were relocated, rotated, or removed from their original settings. The absence of the eighth statue further complicates any attempt to identify a coherent astronomical pattern, leaving the question open as to whether the stone birds truly functioned as instruments of an ancient sky-watching tradition. This historical disruption produced yet another layer of mystery. Many statues were taken out of Zimbabwe during the colonial period, mainly to South Africa and Europe. Some were later returned, but their original positions could no longer be identified. This completely breaks the spatial archaeological logic essential for accurate interpretation. In other words, the mystery of the stone birds is difficult, not only because of the lack of documentation, but also because the archaeological context itself has been damaged. The final and greatest mystery remains. What did the stone birds represent? An eagle, a pelican, an ancestral spirit, a dynastic emblem, or a symbolic creature so abstract that we have no modern language to interpret it? Each theory contains fragments of plausibility, yet none has enough evidence to stand as a conclusion. The absence of definitive information has turned the Great Zimbabwe stone birds into one of the most compelling enigmas of African archaeology, a secret of power, ritual, and spirituality, buried in stone for centuries and still resisting all modern attempts at deciphering. When the Betts family picked up a small steel sphere in the middle of a recently burned forest, they had no idea that this seemingly harmless object would become one of the most baffling mysteries of the 20th century. The sphere measured only about 10 centimeters in diameter, weighed more than 2 kilograms, and had a smooth, seamless, shiny exterior. But the longer they kept it, the more they realized it was not an ordinary forgotten object. There were no signs of damage, no joints, no welding marks. It appeared in an empty area with no buildings, no factories, and no logical reason for its presence. This improbable origin laid the first foundation for a decades-long enigma. What do you think about a perfectly crafted steel sphere appearing in a place where it shouldn't exist? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The strange phenomena occurring inside the Betts home quickly drew the attention of researchers because the sphere seemed to behave in ways that defied conventional physics. It could roll on its own, in perfectly curved paths, even though the floor was completely flat, then suddenly change direction as if responding to its surroundings. Even more astonishing at times, it would roll up a gentle incline, something no inanimate object should be capable of. When a guitar was played nearby, the sphere emitted a deep, unusual resonance, as if a finely tuned chamber existed inside it. At night, it sometimes vibrated softly and reflected odd flashes of light, further convincing many that some kind of internal mechanism, one science has yet to understand, was hidden within. What truly shocked the scientific community was not how the sphere moved, but the very nature of the material from which it was made. When military laboratories conducted their analysis, they discovered that its outer shell was composed of 316 L stainless steel, a familiar industrial alloy. But the surprise lay elsewhere. The steel's purity was so extraordinary that it bordered on impossible, far exceeding civilian standards and even surpassing the manufacturing capabilities of many military facilities at the time. Experts described it as steel that had been fully refined, containing almost no impurities, with a crystalline structure so uniform it approached theoretical perfection. This level of refinement forced materials scientists to confront an uncomfortable question: what technology could produce steel decades ahead of its time? And even more unsettling, who possessed such an advanced capability? In the context of the 1970s, human metallurgy had not yet reached the level of micro-refinement needed to create a perfectly uniform crystalline structure. Even the most advanced Cold War-era processes could not mass-produce steel with a purity comparable to the sample taken from the Betts sphere. Its surface was unusually hard, nearly immune to corrosion, and capable of withstanding great force without deforming. These properties led many experts to speculate that the material had been formed under extremely high pressure and temperature conditions far beyond the industrial capabilities humanity possessed at the time. This very beyond-standard quality sparked suspicion that the sphere's origin might not belong to any known technology in recorded history. The most puzzling detail for engineers was that the sphere's surface showed absolutely no trace of any known metalworking process. There were no cut marks, no weld lines, no grinding traces, no joints. Everything was seamless and impossibly smooth. This led to two unsettling possibilities. Either the sphere was created using a casting technique executed with absolute perfection, or it was formed by a process humanity has never documented. Some experts even suggested that the surface displayed characteristics similar to being printed atom by atom, a technology far beyond anything humans were capable of in 1974. When experts conducted X-ray imaging, the mystery of the Betts sphere became even more perplexing. The scans revealed that inside its ultra-pure steel shell were three smaller spheres, suspended within a denser internal layer, arranged in a configuration strikingly similar to a miniature gyroscopic system. This was not a random formation or a cluster of impurities, but a deliberate structural layout seemingly designed to respond to motion or magnetic fields. The discovery led many researchers to propose that the sphere might be a navigation device, a magnetic sensor, or even a component of highly advanced aerospace technology. Yet the central question remained: if it truly were a piece of engineered equipment, why would its outer shell require such an extraordinarily pure material, one far beyond the standards used even in military applications of that era? Scientific reports examining the sphere revealed that it emitted weak but periodically fluctuating magnetic signals, an observation completely inconsistent with a sealed metal object that contains no internal power source. At times, the fluctuations shifted in intensity as if a tiny mechanism or rotating component were operating inside. Yet every measurement confirmed that the sphere held no batteries, no wiring, no radioactive material, and no form of fuel. A nearly perfect steel object entirely sealed, somehow generating variable magnetic signals. This raises a profound question: how does it operate? The weight of the Betz sphere, just over 2 kilograms, became a perplexing paradox for researchers. With a diameter of about 10 centimeters, it is too light if it contains dense mechanical components inside, yet too heavy to be a simple hollow steel shell. This imbalance eliminated all common explanations, such as a hollow artillery, rounder measuring instrument, or an experimental industrial product. Some experts suggested that its mass implied the presence of material denser than steel, yet X-ray images did not support that idea. A seemingly simple object whose weight matches none of our known technical standards. This remains one of the most enduring mysteries surrounding the Betz sphere. When the US Navy returned the sphere and declared it was not military equipment, the mystery only deepened. Some believe they genuinely did not know what it was. Others think their silence suggested they discovered something too sensitive to reveal. The Betz family never received an official explanation. Worse still, the sphere gradually vanished from public records, leaving no opportunity for modern reanalysis. Today, what turns the Betz mystery sphere into a legend is not just its strange movement, self-rolling behaviors, or puzzling internal structure, but also its hyper-pure, seemingly impossible material composition. If the sphere truly was made from steel of near-perfect purity, processed with techniques that exist only in theoretical models even today, then its origin must belong to a level of technology far beyond human capability. Some say it was part of a secret research program. Others believe it fell from an unidentified flying object. And some insist it was simply an odd but meaningless artifact. Yet no theory explains all aspects. No one can clarify why the steel was almost perfectly pure. No one can describe a manufacturing process capable of producing a seamless spherical shell. No one can explain the sophisticated internal configuration, and no one knows how it functioned without an energy source. The Betz sphere's greatest mystery lies in its material itself, a small metal object containing technology that seems beyond its era, defying the logic of science and remaining unsolved after nearly 50 years. This perfection incompatible with any known human standard has secured its status as one of the most debated and captivating unexplained artifacts in history. Imagine an ancient city perched almost 2,000 meters above the valley floor, where people of the distant past deliberately carved and leveled an entire mountaintop, using nothing but primitive tools. Monte Alban is not just an archaeological site. It is a direct challenge to everything we believe we understand about early civilizations. For thousands of years, it functioned as a center of power, skywatching, and sacred ritual. Yet no one truly knows why it was built. Why did the Zapotec choose the most unforgiving location imaginable? Why were its structures aligned with such astonishing astronomical precision? And what could cause a metropolis of this scale to be abandoned in absolute silence? Monte Alban stands today like an unanswered question, defying every explanation and reminding us that the ancient world held intentions the modern mind has yet to grasp. What do you think Monte Alban was truly built for? Share your theory in the comments below. I'm really curious to see your perspective. The first astonishing aspect of Monte Alban is its location, a high, dry, difficult-to-access mountaintop with almost no natural advantages. Leveling such a large area using only stone and wooden tools is a feat far beyond what is typically attributed to Zapotec engineering. The biggest question is, why didn't they choose a flatter, more fertile area with easier access to water and transportation? The deliberate act of cutting the mountain into a giant flat platform suggests that this location held profound importance, ritual, astronomical, political, or something we still do not fully comprehend. Despite once sustaining tens of thousands of inhabitants, Monte Alban had no natural water source of any kind, a paradox that has puzzled researchers for decades. No streams, no lakes, not even traces of exposed aquifers, and yet the city endured for centuries. Some scholars suggest that the Zapotecs built large-scale rain collection systems, though evidence remains scattered. Another hypothesis proposes that they engineered sophisticated underground water channels that have yet to be discovered. The ability to maintain a city atop such a dry, unforgiving mountain raises a profound question. Did the Zapotec possess water management techniques far more advanced than we have ever imagined? As one steps into the central zone of Monte Alban, it becomes immediately clear that every structure was placed with intention far beyond ordinary architectural needs. The vast plazas, massive terraces, and tiered pyramids were not merely ceremonial monuments. They were aligned with remarkable precision to key astronomical events. Angles that seem irregular at first glance align perfectly with solstices, equinoxes, solar cycles, and especially the orbit of Venus, a celestial body deeply sacred in Mesoamerican cosmology. This level of accuracy has led many scholars to wonder, could Monte Alban have been a colossal astronomical observatory disguised as a ceremonial city? One of the site's most controversial features is the series of carved stone slabs known as the danzantes. These depict human figures in twisted, contorted poses, eyes wide, open mouths, agape bodies in seemingly unnatural states. While some theories claim these represent tortured or executed prisoners, many anatomical details do not match the appearance of normal human bodies. Others propose that the figures represent shamans in altered states of consciousness, though this also fails to fully explain the eerie distortions. The danzantes appear to capture something beyond biological reality, as if the Zapotec intended to portray an experience somewhere between life-death and the spiritual realm. Edificio J is widely regarded as the most peculiar structure at Monte Alban, not only because of its massive arrow-like shape, but also due to the way it intentionally deviates from the architectural axis of the entire site. This deviation is far from accidental. Modern measurements reveal that it is oriented at an angle so precise that it seems almost impossible for the technological capabilities of its time. Some scholars suggest the structure is connected to the cycle of Venus. Others believe the carved symbols on its walls record Zapotec military campaigns. Yet its asymmetry, hollow interior, and ambiguous purpose make Edificio J a truly singular mystery, an architectural form unmatched anywhere else in Mesoamerica, and one for which no theory has yet offered a fully satisfying explanation. The tombs of Monte Alban have revealed a treasure trove of artifacts that compel archaeologists to reconsider long-held assumptions about Zapotec technological skill. Inside them, researchers discovered turquoise masks assembled from hundreds of tiny pieces, each cut and fitted with astonishing precision, along with gold objects hammered thin, curved, and shaped with a level of refinement difficult to imagine using only stone tools. Countless other ornaments and ritual items display craftsmanship of true mastery. The most intriguing question concerns the origin of this expertise. Did the Zapotec develop such techniques independently over generations, or were they inherited from the Olmec Maya Teotihuacan, or perhaps from a civilization not yet identified? The traces of cultural exchange found within these tombs suggest a far-reaching network of interaction. Yet the true nature of that network remains shrouded in mystery. Around the 10th century, Monte Alban was abandoned in a manner that continues to puzzle researchers today. There are no traces of warfare, no evidence of epidemic or natural disaster, and no signs of societal collapse. Instead, the departure appears orderly, as if the Zapotec deliberately decided that this once powerful city no longer served its original purpose. But what force could compel the abandonment of a center of power, ritual, and knowledge that had endured for more than 1,000 years? It is precisely this absence of a clear reason that makes Monte Alban's disappearance one of the most perplexing mysteries in all of Mesoamerica. All the mysteries surrounding Monte Alban ultimately lead to one central question: what exactly was this place built? For every feature of the site hints at a different function. Yet none of these functions can fully account for the city's complex design. If Monte Alban is viewed as the first political center of Zapotec civilization, this might explain the presence of defensive walls, grand plazas, and carved stones recording military victories. However, it does not explain why the Zapotec chose such a harsh, impractical mountaintop location. A typical administrative city would never require leveling an entire mountain to create a foundation, nor would it be abandoned quietly after more than 1,000 years of occupation. On the other hand, the precise alignment of structures with the sun's solstices, equinoxes, and especially the cycle of Venus has led many scholars to consider Monte Alban an astronomical center. Angles that seem irregular at first are in fact nearly perfect matches for celestial events, suggesting the Zapotec possessed extraordinary astronomical knowledge. But if this was merely an observatory, why construct it on such a monumental scale? Why build vast plazas, enormous terraces, and dense architectural clusters like a fully functioning city? An observatory needs only elevation and clear sightlines, not a sprawling complex spanning generations. And if Monte Alban was a ceremonial center, a theory supported by the presence of pyramidal platforms, ritual plazas, and supernatural symbolism, then it becomes difficult to reconcile that idea with the site's administrative and territorial features. A purely ritual site rarely incorporates strategic, political, or military elements. Yet Monte Alban shows signs of all of these: territorial inscriptions, defensive architecture, symbols of authority, and precise astronomical alignments. Taken together, these clues suggest that Monte Alban may have been a multifunctional center shaped by a worldview very different from any we know. It contains political features, but is not merely a capital. Astronomical alignments, yet is not solely an observatory. Powerful ritual spaces, yet not simply a religious site. It is possible that for the Zapotecs, political authority, religious power, and astronomical knowledge were inseparable, merged into a single system that modern frameworks cannot neatly categorize. And today, the only certainty is that we still do not understand Monte Alban in the way its creators did. High above the clouds on a narrow ridge of the Andes, Machu Picchu guards a relic so strange that even seasoned archaeologists cannot agree on what it truly is. Visitors call it the stone sundial, yet that name barely scratches the surface of its mystery. For this carved monolith, the Intihuatana stone behaves nothing like any sundial humanity has ever known. It defies the rules, breaks the patterns, and stands as a silent challenge to modern science, neither fully religious nor purely astronomical. It is a riddle carved in stone, a device whose true purpose has slipped through centuries of conquest, forgotten knowledge, and fading oral traditions. What makes it even more astonishing is this: despite its familiar nickname, the Intihuatana does not function like a sundial at all, and understanding why may reveal a hidden side of the Inca that the world has never fully grasped. What do you think the Intihuatana was truly created for? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Although commonly referred to as a sundial, the Intihuatana possesses none of the characteristics of a traditional time-measuring instrument. Ancient sundials, from Greece to Egypt, all feature clear hour lines, precisely calibrated flat surfaces, and a gnomon positioned at a specific mathematical angle, so the sun's shadow moves in a predictable rhythm. Yet the stone at Machu Picchu lacks all of these elements. Its surfaces were never designed for shadow reading, and its structure consists of strange, slanted planes, neither parallel nor perpendicular, making the measurement of time virtually impossible. Even the central protruding pillar, the only part that could be mistaken for a gnomon, is not aligned with any known astronomical standard. Every contour of the stone suggests it was never meant to tell time, but instead served a symbolic ritual or celestial marking function. And it is precisely this complete deviation from technical norms that raises a profound unresolved question. If it was not built to measure time, then what were the Inca truly trying to measure? Modern studies show that the Intihuatana was not created to measure time throughout the day, but was instead aligned with such remarkable precision to key celestial moments, the equinoxes, the solstices, and the seasonal turning points essential to Inca life. This accuracy is far from accidental, for to the Inca, the changing of the seasons dictated both agricultural cycles and sacred rituals. Most striking is the winter solstice, when the sun reaches a very specific altitude and the shadow of the central pillar nearly disappears, producing a phenomenon many visitors describe as surreal. This is not the behavior of a functional sundial, but the expression of a ritual encoded into stone, a moment when the sun, the earth, and humanity intersect perfectly, reflecting the meaning of the word Intihuatana, the stone that ties the sun, preventing it from wandering away from the world. The shape of the Intihuatana makes it even more difficult to interpret because its structure is not optimized to track the sun's shadow like conventional time-measuring instruments. Instead of having standardized, calibrated surfaces, the stone is carved into multiple tiers and angled planes, forming a complex geometry that evokes the Incas' three-layered cosmos, the upper world of gods and Sky Hananpacha, the present world of humans, K-Pacha, and the underworld of ancestors, darkness and origins, Uku-Pacha. This layered form is not technical in nature, but reflects a profound symbolic worldview in which the universe is perceived as a living, interconnected whole. For this reason, many scholars believe the stone was not created to measure time, but to embody and link the concepts of sky, earth, and humanity, expressing the Incas' religious and cosmological philosophy far more deeply than any practical function could. One reason Intihuatana remains difficult to decipher is that the Inca did not leave written records like those of Egypt or Mesopotamia. Therefore, no official documentation exists to explain the stone's actual purpose. What we know today is pieced together from archaeology legends and modern simulations. Some traditions claim that Inca rulers performed solstice rituals by touching the stone to connect with the sun god Inti, ensuring prosperity for the crops. Other tales describe it as a meeting point between the spirits of the deceased and the divine realm. If these stories hold any truth, Intihuatana was not a timekeeping tool, but a ritual instrument with deep spiritual significance. Intihuatana stands on a raised platform with panoramic views of the surrounding mountains, indicating that its position was deliberately chosen. It may have been used to track seasonal changes in sunlight or mark key moments in the Inca agricultural calendar. However, its structural design still does not align with how sundials function. Hypotheses suggesting it is a type of calendar pillar remain unconvincing because the stone's complexity surpasses that of any known ancient astronomical tool. The Intihuatana becomes even more remarkable when examined through the lens of Inca stoneworking techniques. The entire structure was carved directly from the living bedrock, never separated and reassembled, which required an extraordinary level of control and understanding of the material, especially considering the Inca worked without iron or steel tools. Its sharp, precise cuts, smoothly finished planes, and flawless balance reveal meticulous planning to ensure the monument could withstand centuries of mountain winds, cold rains, and geological shifts. Yet this very craftsmanship highlights a striking paradox. Despite its exceptional precision, the stone shows no characteristics of a time-measuring device. Every detail suggests a purpose far beyond practicality, something symbolic, sacred, and deeply tied to the spiritual world of the Inca. Another striking aspect of Intihuatana is its rarity. Nearly all other Intihuatana stones in Peru were destroyed by the Spanish, who viewed them as symbols of pagan worship. Machu Picchu, hidden deep in the mountains and undiscovered during the colonial era, preserved this stone intact. Because of that, scholars cannot compare it to multiple surviving examples, making the task of decoding it even more difficult. Although numerous 3D simulations, astronomical measurements, and modern geomagnetic analyses have been carried out, the true function of the Intihuatana still has no definitive answer. Some researchers suggest it was used to track the sun's seasonal path and to support rituals marking the transitions of the year. Others note subtle geomagnetic fluctuations around the site, leading to the hypothesis that the stone may have been involved in ceremonies meant to sense or interact with Earth energy. However, all of these interpretations remain speculative, lacking evidence strong enough to form an official conclusion, leaving the Intihuatana a mystery that continues to resist explanation. All these elements show that the Intihuatana stone is vastly more complex than the idea of a sundial. It does not tell time, does not follow sundial geometry, and does not operate like any known time-measuring device. Instead, it represents a fusion of astronomy, religion, ritual, and Inca cosmic philosophy, a worldview entirely different from that of the modern scientific mind. Standing before the stone, one senses clearly that it was never meant to be a tool, but rather a ritual monument, a bridge between humans and the sun. And perhaps it is precisely this inability to decode it that has made Intihuatana one of the greatest enduring mysteries of the Inca civilization. In the barren Theban Valley of Egypt, where the rising sun coats the desert each day with a blazing golden light, two colossal statues have stood for more than 3 millennia, silent, motionless, seemingly destined only to guard a land long forgotten by time. Yet there was an era when, at the exact moment the first rays of dawn struck the cracked surface of the granodiorite stone, one of the statues began to emit sound. Not the sound of wind nor the fracture of stone, but strange tones that rose like the twang of a tightened string, like a faint whistle, sliding through the cold morning air, or deep, resonant murmurs that sent shivers down the spine. Ancient witnesses believed it was the voice of a god. This phenomenon went by many names: Memnon singing the vocal statue, singing Colossi, but none could truly capture the feeling of standing before an icy Egyptian dawn, when the desert was still cloaked in mist and mysterious sounds echoed as if from another world. Most astonishing of all, the statues possessed no mechanism to produce sound, no carved chambers or designs resembling instruments. They were simply massive blocks of stone weighing hundreds of tons, yet somehow they sang. If you were standing in the Egyptian desert and heard a colossal statue making sounds at dawn, what do you think would actually be happening? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The phenomenon became legendary because of its uncanny regularity. The sound appeared only at sunrise, when the sun had just emerged, not yet hot enough to expand the stone significantly, but warm enough to disturb the cold air trapped in the cracks. The northern statue emitted faint yet distinct sounds. Roman visitors described them as the strained vibration of a harp string, the weak groan of a wounded man, or the delicate chime of a restless spirit. Strangely, the sounds varied from day to day, sometimes louder, sometimes softer, but persisted for centuries, never random. The tones had rhythm resonance, and sometimes lingered for tens of seconds, long enough that astonished visitors carved their experiences directly onto the statue's surface, unable to express their wonder in any other way. Although the two colossi of Memnon were constructed almost identically, sharing the same material, the same height, the same craftsmanship, and standing only a few steps apart, the greatest mystery lies in the fact that only the northern statue produced sound, while the southern statue remained completely silent for thousands of years. This raises a fundamental question. If the sound were merely the result of temperature changes or the thermal expansion of stone, why didn't both statues emit the same phenomenon? And if the cause was the cracking of the stone, why did only the northern statue fracture in the perfect way to create tones that resonated like a musical instrument? The earthquake in 70 BCE shattered the upper portion of the northern statue, forming deep, hollow chambers and complex fissures. And from that point forward, the song began. Yet even this detail does not fully explain the mystery, as no one knows whether the sound had existed earlier but simply went unrecorded, or whether the earthquake accidentally triggered an extremely rare natural mechanism. The stark difference between two statues that stand side by side like twin brothers, but only one possessing a voice, continues to perplex archaeologists and acoustic experts to this day. For the Greeks and Romans fascinated by explaining the extraordinary through mythology, the sound was believed to be the voice of Memnon, the Ethiopian hero slain in the Trojan War. They believed that his spirit greeted his mother, the dawn goddess Eos, whenever the first light of the day touched the statue. From that belief, the two stone colossi became one of the most famous pilgrimage destinations of the ancient world. Nobles, generals, officials, and even emperors traveled there, standing motionless as the sun rose, hoping to hear what they believed was a divine message from beyond. Historical inscriptions show that this reverence was so strong that the statues became vibrant religious symbols for centuries. What makes the singing statue phenomenon particularly compelling is not myth or the embellishments of time, but the inscriptions left directly on the statue by eyewitnesses themselves. More than 30 Greek and Roman carvings spanning several centuries describe in detail the exact moment they heard the sound at dawn, the time they arrived, what the sound resembled, how overwhelming their sense of astonishment was, and even the prayers they offered to Memnon afterward. These inscriptions function like a series of ancient field reports written by completely different individuals, yet describing the same phenomenon with remarkable consistency. They have become powerful evidence that archaeologists cannot ignore, for almost no other natural acoustic mystery in history has been recorded so directly, continuously, and in such vivid detail across generations. The very existence of these words etched into stone makes it nearly impossible to argue that the song was merely a legend, exaggerated over time. Although modern science has attempted to explain the singing statue phenomenon through various physical models, none of the proposed theories are truly convincing. The most common explanation suggests that when the sun rapidly heats the stone surface, microscopic cracks expand unevenly, creating vibrations similar to the sound of a musical instrument, a form of thermoelasticity. Another hypothesis argues that the hollow chambers inside the statue formed after the ancient earthquake functioned like a natural flute, as warm and cold air alternated through them. However, these explanations leave significant gaps. If it were purely a natural effect, why were the sounds so clear and rhythmic, resembling musical tones rather than chaotic cracking noises? Why did only one statue produce sound, while the other, identical in both material and structure, remained completely silent? And most importantly, why did the sound vanish immediately after the Romans restored the statue and sealed its fissures as if someone had switched it off? Because the statue was altered, researchers can no longer observe its original state, forcing all conclusions to remain speculative. This absence of direct empirical data is precisely what keeps the enigma of the singing colossi beyond the full reach of modern science. In the 3rd century CE, Emperor Septimius Severus ordered the damaged statue repaired. Cracks were filled, the structure reinforced, and immediately the singing ceased forever. Those who believed in natural causes argued that sealing the hollows removed the conditions necessary for sound production. Those who favored the supernatural insisted that Memnon's spirit had been silenced, losing the path through which he greeted the dawn. Regardless of interpretation, the disappearance only intensified the mystery. It demonstrated that the sound was not random, but dependent on a delicate and unique state of the statue, one that once altered could never be replicated. Two colossal statues, each nearly 20 meters tall and weighing hundreds of tons, producing sound at sunrise for centuries without human intervention, remains one of the greatest acoustic mysteries ever recorded. The phenomenon blends science, mythology, and vivid human experience into a legacy that cannot be explained through theory alone. And perhaps the most thought-provoking aspect is this: even with modern technology, we cannot recreate the statue's voice. The giants still stand silent in the desert, but the song that once echoed through empires has vanished forever, leaving behind a mystery that humanity will continue to ponder for generations. Amid the scorching deserts of Sudan, where the ancient kingdoms of Nubia and Kush once forged their own empires, lies a mystery that even the most seasoned archaeologists struggle to comprehend: the crocodile tombs of Sudan. Hidden deep within the remnants of ancient Nile branches, these tombs resemble no other site ever discovered. They contain no human remains, no prayers carved into stone, no divine symbols, and no funerary offerings. Instead, resting in the dust-filled darkness are crocodiles preserved with astonishing perfection, buried through a ritual unseen in any known civilization. And the strangest part is this: the deeper researchers dig, the clearer it becomes that every established historical logic collapses in front of this phenomenon. These tombs do more than challenge archaeological understanding. They raise an unprecedented question: who did this and why? What do you think happened here? And who buried these crocodiles? Share your theory in the comments below. Despite having lain underground for thousands of years, many of the crocodile remains in Sudan's tombs still retain their skin teeth and bodily structure in astonishing condition, something even modern conservation specialists struggle to explain. The most shocking part is that they underwent none of the traditional Egyptian mummification procedures. No natron, no linen wrappings, no aromatic resins. The ancient people simply buried the crocodiles whole, sometimes arranged neatly, sometimes left in natural positions as if they had just died. This level of preservation makes them look more like creatures merely resting than bodies that have endured millennia, raising a profound question: how could such a simple method of burial produce preservation this extraordinary? The crocodiles buried in Sudan's tombs were not just large, many exceeded 3 meters in length, far surpassing the size of modern Nile crocodiles. Capturing and transporting such powerful and dangerous creatures would have required a level of technique or organizational strength that we have no evidence ancient Sudanese communities possessed. Even more puzzling is that Sudan shows no trace of a crocodile-based religion like that of Egypt, no temples to Sobek, no statues, no sacred symbols. And yet the manner in which these crocodiles were buried reveals a clear sense of reverence, as if they held a special role in the spiritual life of a community that has long vanished without leaving its name. One of the most perplexing aspects of the crocodile tombs in Sudan is that they contain no traces of inscriptions or ritual symbols whatsoever. In the ancient world, every ceremony, even the smallest one, left behind some kind of mark: carvings, religious motifs, prayers, or at least a sign hinting at its purpose. Yet here the stone walls are completely bare, an eerie and unsettling silence. Not a single line of text, not a single drawing, not even the faintest clue, indicating who created this unusual ritual. This absolute absence of evidence only deepens the mystery. How could a tradition, so carefully executed, leave behind no explanation at all? Some of the tombs contain only crocodile skulls, arranged neatly as if they held some symbolic significance. Meanwhile, other tombs preserve entire crocodile bodies, sometimes placed upon a layer of mysterious leaves. Strangely, this type of leaf cannot be identified and matches no plant species found in Sudan today, raising the possibility that it belonged to an ancient ecosystem that has since vanished. The use of leaves hints at a ceremonial purpose, yet their meaning remains completely unknown. Even more astonishing is that many of these leaves still retain their structure after thousands of years, suggesting the tombs maintained an extremely dry and stable microenvironment. However, natural conditions alone cannot explain why such large crocodiles remain so well preserved. For this reason, some scholars believe the ancient people here may have used a unique preservation technique, a lost method that modern science has yet to reconstruct. Another striking detail: no human graves have been found near these crocodile burials. In many ancient cemeteries, humans and animals are often interred together for symbolic reasons. But here there are no signs of priests, guardians, sacrificial participants, or ritual leaders. Only crocodiles, animals typically viewed as dangerous predators rather than sacred beings. This raises a chilling question: who buried them? And why is there no trace of the people who performed the ritual? Radiocarbon analysis shows that the crocodile tombs in Sudan did not appear within a single period, but instead span multiple centuries, proving that this was not a spontaneous act, but a long-standing ceremonial tradition. Yet no known civilization along the Nile practiced anything like it. It does not belong to Meroe, nor to Nubia, nor to Kush, and it bears no resemblance to Egypt. This cultural outlier status makes the tombs a completely isolated phenomenon, the trace of a mysterious community that existed outside every archaeological framework we currently understand. Many scholars have attempted to explain the crocodile tombs through religious hypotheses, suggesting they may have been part of a ritual connected to water or the Nile. However, all the evidence needed to support such an idea is completely absent. No written records, no sacred symbols, no temple structures. In ancient civilizations, important rituals were always recorded somewhere. Yet here, there is only absolute silence. This total lack of supporting evidence makes religious explanations fragile and insufficient to clarify the origins of this mysterious practice. Some scholars believe that ancient people buried crocodiles to prevent their fierce spirits from returning to harm the community, similar to how certain cultures buried wolves or leopards to lock their power beneath the ground. But this theory quickly encounters problems. If the purpose was merely containment, why were the crocodiles placed so carefully and respectfully, and why was only this species chosen? Another line of speculation suggests that crocodiles may have symbolized political authority for an unknown group, yet archaeology has found no trace of such a mysterious community. Some even propose that the animals were interred because they carried healing energy or magical power. But if that were true, there should be ritual tools, chemical residues, or symbolic objects accompanying them. And yet none have been found. This complete absence of evidence renders every hypothesis fragile, mere fragments of speculation attempting to fill a void that the past seems to have intentionally left without explanation. In the end, all theories face one fundamental problem: there is no direct evidence. No texts, no carvings, no grave goods, no human footprints, no ritual debris. This emptiness deepens the enigma. The crocodile tombs appear not merely as animal burials, but as a message from the past, delivered without context. A tradition sustained for centuries, yet leaving no trace of its practitioners. A ritual seemingly of great importance, yet lacking any religious markers. And so the greatest question hangs over the Sudanese desert: which lost culture buried these crocodiles, and where did they disappear? Today, all archaeological evidence leads to a single conclusion: we do not know the true purpose of the crocodile tombs of Sudan. And we may never know. Their utter silence in architecture, text, and symbolism has made them one of the most impenetrable archaeological mysteries, a missing chapter of human history whose results we can see, but whose story remains untold. The demon carvings of Yazilikaya are among the most challenging enigmas for modern archaeology, pushing the limits of both imagination and interpretation. Situated within the sacred open-air rock sanctuary of the Hittite Empire, a powerful civilization that dominated Anatolia over 3,200 years ago, Yazilikaya is believed to have been a major ceremonial center. It served as a place where humans carved into stone the structure of the divine world, the cycles of the cosmos, and the rituals that connected the living to the supernatural. Yet among dozens of deities, mythic royals, and cosmic symbols carved with remarkable precision, one group of figures has confused researchers more than any other being shaped as half-human, half-animal, commonly labeled today as demons. They are not exactly monsters, not exactly gods, and do not fit into any familiar mythological category known in world traditions. This ambiguity has placed them at the center of decades of debate and investigation. What do you think the demons at Yazilikaya were actually doing in those ancient rituals, guarding the gates, guiding souls, or representing some cosmic force we still don't understand? Share your thoughts below. These carvings were engraved directly onto exposed rock surfaces, executed with deliberate precision, showing that the Hittites were not merely shaping images, they were crafting messages. Many demons stand beside the highest-ranking gods of the sanctuary, even joining ceremonial processions typically reserved for divine beings. This positioning prevents scholars from dismissing them as decorative monsters or secondary symbols. On the contrary, their placement strongly suggests they held significant importance. Yet the paradox remains: no existing Hittite text describes their identity, purpose, or mythological background. For a civilization known for its extensive administrative and ritual records, this absence deepens the mystery considerably. Across all of Yazilikaya, nothing has sparked more intense debate than the question, what exactly did these demons represent? This is not merely an artistic curiosity, it is the key to understanding the entire ritual structure and worldview of the Hittites. Some scholars argue that these beings were guardians of the underworld gates. Based on their rigid postures, pillar-like legs, and hybrid human-animal faces, they resemble boundary keepers standing motionless at the threshold between the world of the living and the dead. This theory becomes even more intriguing when considering that several archaeologists believe Yazilikaya was designed as a miniature model of the cosmos, divided into three realms: the heavens, the human world, and the underworld. If this is accurate, the demons may have served as protectors of cosmic order, ensuring no force crossed its designated boundary. Yet the greatest contradiction remains: why would underworld guardians appear right beside the supreme gods standing in the same ceremonial lineup? This clashes directly with the notion that they were mere gatekeepers. Another interpretation suggests that the demons acted as guides of souls during transitional rituals, moments associated with symbolic rebirth or transformation, such as coronations, New Year ceremonies, or purification rites. From this perspective, their hybrid forms are not signs of danger, but symbols of beings that transcend human limits. However, the biggest obstacle for this theory is that the Hittites left no written texts describing such sacred functions. What we possess today is imagery, not explanations. In recent years, a groundbreaking theory has emerged. Yazilikaya may have been a massive stone calendar, functioning according to astronomical cycles. In this model, gods and demons are grouped into units of time, and the demons specifically represent critical transition points: night turning into day, the old year passing into new year, winter shifting into spring, or even the threshold between life and death. If this interpretation is correct, their presence beside the gods becomes entirely logical. They are not lower-ranking beings, but pillars of the cosmic cycle, the hinges through which even the gods must pass. Although this theory is appreciated for its coherence, it still faces skepticism due to the lack of direct textual evidence. Ultimately, the contradictions, missing data, and ambiguity of their placement make the demon's role a mystery that cannot be fully deciphered. They might be guardians, guides, markers of cosmic time, or something far beyond our current imagination. And perhaps it is precisely because no one can answer with certainty that this enigma has endured so powerfully for more than 3 millennia. One of the greatest challenges in studying Yazilikaya is that we now see only the remnants of the original complex. Many of the demon carvings have been worn down by time to the point where only faint silhouettes remain. Heads, missing arms, broken entire forms, distorted. Earthquakes, weather, and millennia of erosion have erased countless crucial details, leaving archaeologists feeling as though they are trying to read a book, with many of its chapters missing. Within this fragmentation, the true role of the demons becomes even harder to determine. Were they central figures in the rituals or merely part of a larger symbolic system that we can no longer understand? Another striking detail is the complete silence of Hittite written records. This empire was renowned for its meticulous archival culture, legal texts, rituals, treaties, and administrative documents. Yet there is not a single surviving line that mentions beings resembling the demons of Yazilikaya. This has led to bold suggestions. Perhaps these carvings represent esoteric or restricted knowledge reserved only for elite priesthood and never written down. Or maybe the symbolism was so familiar to Hittite society that documenting it was unnecessary, leaving us today without the key needed to decode it. This silence is not just a lack of data. It represents the disappearance of an entire spiritual layer of the Hittite worldview. The overall layout reinforces the enigma. The demons do not appear alone, but are integrated into a flowing procession of divine figures. Their positioning, direction, and scale create the sense of a ceremony in motion, one whose meaning we can no longer grasp. If the gods symbolize ultimate cosmic power, the inclusion of demons among them suggests these hybrid beings held an official sanctioned role, perhaps as intermediaries, protectors, or embodiments of forces necessary for maintaining universal balance. What makes the demons of Yazilikaya most compelling is their complete uniqueness compared to every ancient mythological system we know. They do not resemble the fearsome demons of the Near East, nor the animal-headed gods of Egypt, nor the protective spirits of Mesopotamia. Instead, they exist outside all familiar categories, as if belonging to an independent belief system that was never recorded. This uniqueness suggests that the Hittites possessed a spiritual world far deeper and more complex than what surviving texts can reveal. Today, the demons of Yazilikaya still stand motionless, silent, unyielding as witnesses to a worldview that vanished long ago. Every theory we propose is only a fragment of a larger picture now obscured by time. Perhaps it is precisely this uncertainty, this sense of an unreachable truth, that makes the demon carvings of Yazilikaya one of the most captivating archaeological enigmas on Earth. Each carved line is not just art, it is a reminder that entire layers of human history have slipped into eternal silence. Amid the majestic landscape of Cappadocia and Turkey, where soft volcanic towers rise like hundreds of wind-sculpted spires, lies a mystery that science has yet to decipher. Scattered across the region are ancient faces carved directly into the rock, appearing isolated yet intentional, seemingly belonging to a civilization whose name has vanished. They are not freestanding statues nor simple bas-reliefs, but enormous faces engraved into soft, tough stone material that erodes easily, yet somehow preserves delicate carvings for thousands of years. Since their discovery, these faces have become one of Cappadocia's most perplexing enigmas, straddling the boundary between archaeology, mythology, and the unrecorded past. Do these ancient faces hint at a lost civilization or something entirely different? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. What puzzles researchers the most is the absolute silence of history. In a region like Cappadocia, where nearly every passing civilization, from the Hittites and Persians to the Romans and Byzantines, left behind abundant traces, the absence of any inscription, chronicle or legend mentioning these carved faces is extraordinarily unusual. Archaeological records describe monasteries, underground cities, and ancient religious life in great detail, yet not a single line documents or even hints at these carvings. No names of artisans, no ritual markers, no historical context. This complete void has led many scholars to wonder, could these faces have been created before recorded civilizations emerged, or do they belong to a community that vanished too early, leaving behind nothing but silent faces, gazing over the valleys? This absence of evidence deepens the mystery, as if an entire chapter of history has been erased from humanity's memory. One of the most debated features of the Cappadocia faces is their striking, yet seemingly intentional asymmetry. Many of the carvings show eyes that sit unevenly, unusually elongated noses, or mouths tilted at unnatural angles. If such distortions appeared only sporadically, they could easily be dismissed as the result of erosion. But their consistent repetition across multiple locations has led researchers to wonder whether this represents a distinctive artistic style, perhaps depicting deities, guardian spirits, or other powerful beings believed to inhabit the ancient landscape. It is also possible that these forms reflect an aesthetic worldview entirely different from ours, belonging to a cultural group we have not yet identified. This patterned irregularity has convinced many scholars that the distorted lines are not accidental, but rather a symbolic code carrying layers of meaning that time has erased from human understanding. One of the most perplexing aspects for archaeologists is how these faces appear in locations that are nearly impossible to reach. Some are carved atop towering stone spires that rise like natural pyramids. Others cling to sheer cliff walls, where even today access requires ropes, anchors, and specialized climbing equipment. So how did people thousands of years ago manage to do this? Did they build wooden scaffolds stretching tens of meters high? Or was the difficulty intentional, choosing the highest, farthest, and most dangerous places so the faces could watch over the valleys, mark territory, or align with some celestial event? Some spots are so extreme that modern survey teams can barely stand there for more than a few minutes. Yet someone in the distant past spent hours, perhaps days, carving soft stone into human form. This leads to a pressing question: why did they insist on placing these faces in such inaccessible places, and what message was important enough to justify such extraordinary effort? Some faces exhibit features unlike those of modern humans: low foreheads, deep eye sockets, sharp cheekbones, elongated chins. They resemble ancient descriptions of Anatolian giants or mythical beings said to dwell underground. Of course, no evidence confirms this, but none completely refutes it either. Their half-human, half-mythic appearance has led some researchers to consider the possibility of ritual symbolism or depictions of protective spiritual guardians believed to watch over the land. One of the strangest details in Cappadocia is the appearance of dual faces carved into the same block of stone, each one looking in a different direction. This motif resembles the Roman god Janus. Yet Cappadocia was not under Roman artistic influence during the period these carvings are believed to have been made. The presence of such a rare symbol in a place with no clear cultural connection has left archaeologists puzzled. Was this part of an unrecorded local belief system or evidence of an ideology that has completely vanished? The motif stands alone like a misplaced puzzle piece with no known culture able to explain its origin. An often overlooked yet highly significant discovery is that some of the ancient faces were once painted. Under mineral analysis, researchers detected faint traces of red and black pigments embedded deep within the stone's surface, evidence that these carvings were originally decorated with natural colorants. However, what truly confounds experts is that the painting technique does not resemble any known Byzantine or Roman style, both of which employed very distinctive binders and layering methods. This complete divergence in technique weakens the theory that early Christians created the carvings as monastery ornamentation. Instead, it raises a far more intriguing question. Could these pigments be the remnants of an unrecorded artistic tradition belonging to a community that has entirely vanished from history? Cappadocia is renowned for its massive underground cities like Derinkuyu and Kaymakli, where ancient inhabitants lived to escape conflict and harsh climates. Some carved faces appear at entrances to these subterranean systems as though guarding or warning those who enter. Yet there is no evidence linking the carvers to the architects of the underground cities. The two phenomena seem connected, but no historical proof ties them together. The expressions on the faces are peculiar. They do not display serene smiles or regal religious calm. Instead, they exhibit strong emotions: fear, sorrow, warning, even shock, as if witnessing something catastrophic. Why would a civilization carve such haunting expressions into the cliffs of its homeland? What were they trying to convey? A traumatic event? A collective memory? A warning for those who came after them? What makes the mystery of Cappadocia so captivating is that no one truly knows why these faces were created. Every theory, from religious symbolism and territorial markers to the rituals of a vanished cult, remains purely speculative because no archaeological evidence supports any of them. There are no inscriptions nearby, no associated artifacts, and no signs of habitation that might hint at their purpose. Some archaeoastronomers have proposed that the orientation of the faces relates to solar or lunar cycles, but upon deeper examination, the data fails to provide convincing proof. It is as if the faces have deliberately chosen silence. They endure unchanged, yet reveal nothing about the reason for their existence. The impression is that we are confronting an ancient message encoded so skillfully that no matter how hard we try, we are left standing before an unsolvable void. What stands out most is that every theory is missing its final piece. If they were religious works, why are there no other symbols? If they were warnings, what danger were they warning against? If they were artworks, why place them in perilous locations? And if they were remnants of a vanished civilization, where is that civilization in Anatolia's historical record? These questions have lingered for decades with no satisfying answers. For this reason, the ancient cave faces of Cappadocia are not just archaeological curiosities. They are a challenge to modern science, a reminder that even in regions we believe we understand, profound mysteries persist. These faces watch silently from the cliffs, saying nothing, guiding nothing, standing like encoded messages from a culture swallowed by time. And until definitive evidence emerges, their true purpose will remain an open question, a void that neither science nor imagination can yet fill. Deep in the frozen silence of Siberia, a land where even mammoths once struggled to survive, archaeologists stumbled upon something that should not exist. Scattered across the tundra stand eerie constructions, built not of stone or wood, but of massive prehistoric bones, arranged with precision and purpose. These are the bone towers, towering circles and pillars assembled by Ice Age humans whose capabilities were never believed to reach this level of complexity. They are not the chaotic leftovers of predators, not the remnants of melting glacial deposits, and certainly not natural formations. Every bone was placed deliberately, every layer meticulously arranged. Yet the greatest mystery remains untouched. Why did ancient humans create these colossal structures of death? And what secret purpose did they serve in a world ruled by ice. What do you think the true purpose of these bone towers was? Ritual survival, or something entirely different? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The bone towers of Siberia were built from an extraordinary material, the bones of gigantic prehistoric animals such as mammoths, ancient bison, reindeer, and several species that vanished tens of thousands of years ago. What astonishes researchers is not only the careful selection of these bones, but the way ancient humans arranged them into perfect circles, enclosed bone walls, upright pillars, or stacked layers, forming unusually tall structures. Each construction may contain hundreds or even thousands of bones, many weighing dozens of kilograms, all placed with such precision that it becomes clear these formations were not accidental. Instead, they represent a deliberate architectural effort, revealing a surprisingly advanced level of structural thinking for Ice Age humans. The age of these bone towers is estimated to be 20 to 30,000 years old, dating back to the harshest phase of the Ice Age. This was a time when humans lived in small, scattered groups, constantly migrating in search of food, and had virtually no form of permanent architecture. Yet the existence of these bone structures tells a completely different story. They had the ability to organize labor, gather massive amounts of materials, and arrange them into deliberate architectural forms. This forces scientists to reconsider their assumptions about humans of that era, for it is clear that these ancient groups possessed a level of coordination and structural thinking far more advanced than previously believed. One of the greatest mysteries and the central point of fascination is how prehistoric people obtained tons of bones to build these structures. A single large bone circle can weigh up to 10 tons or even more. This raises the question, how did small hunter-gatherer groups accumulate such an enormous quantity of materials? And more importantly, why would they do this when Ice Age survival demanded constant focus on food, shelter, and warmth? Scientists have proposed several hypotheses, but none are conclusive. The first suggests that they hunted mammoths in large numbers, harvesting the bones to construct these structures. But hunting mammoths was extraordinarily difficult. Mammoths weighed 6 to 10 tons, with thick fur, tough skin, and immense strength. Taking down even a single mammoth was a monumental feat. So how could they possibly hunt enough to build an entire fortress of bones? The second hypothesis suggests they collected bones from mammoths that died naturally due to starvation, disease, or severe snowstorms. This is more plausible, but it raises another question. Why would so many mammoths die at the same time and place, allowing early humans to gather tons of bones for a single site? And how could they determine which bones were usable and which were too decayed? Another crucial detail: the bones brought back were carefully selected. Builders did not gather every bone they found. They preferred skulls, pelvises, and long leg bones, strong, large, durable pieces, ideal for building. Some bones even show signs of light shaping or trimming, indicating intentional aesthetic or structural choices. This weakens the random scavenging theory, since it cannot explain such refined material selection. Transporting and erecting these massive bones was likely the greatest challenge Ice Age humans ever faced. Each bone weighed from several kilograms to dozens, yet they managed to drag them across snow-fierce winds and rugged terrain without wheels, without draft animals, and without any lifting tools. To stand the largest bones upright, they had to coordinate, precisely understand balance, and distribute force skills that scientists once believed were far beyond the abilities of hunter-gatherer societies. And yet they accomplished it, making this mystery even more difficult to explain. What puzzles researchers the most is not only how these structures were built, but why they were built at all. At nearly every archaeological site, there is no evidence of long-term habitation. No large hearths for warmth, no trash pits, no everyday tools, and no signs of burials. This effectively rules out the possibility that these were dwellings or winter shelters, things that would have been essential for survival during the harsh Ice Age climate. So why would ancient people invest such enormous effort into constructing something so massive? Some scholars propose that these bone towers may have had a ritual purpose, perhaps connected to spiritual beliefs or ceremonies related to mammoths. Others suggest they might have been a way for humans to assert power over nature or to mark the territory of mammoth hunting groups. Yet there is no biological or artistic evidence to support these ideas. No carved symbols on the bones, no ritual offerings, no artifacts that point to a specific cultural function. An even more striking fact is that the culture responsible for these structures has vanished entirely, leaving behind no myths, no rituals, no fragments of their belief system. As a result, the bone towers resemble messages without recipients, pale, silent circles resting in the frozen landscape, raising countless questions with no answers. This absence of context is precisely what makes their true purpose one of the greatest enigmas in prehistoric archaeology. One equally intriguing aspect is that each bone tower has a completely different shape, appearing to follow no unified architectural pattern. In some sites, the bones are arranged into large circular formations. In others, they are stacked into structures resembling primitive pyramids. Certain formations look like windbreak walls, while others resemble ceremonial gateways. This diversity suggests that multiple distinct communities may have built them, or that there once existed a broader ancient culture with varied construction styles depending on purpose. However, all of this remains speculative, as no direct evidence currently confirms any specific interpretation. One theory proposes that the bone towers were temporary winter shelters built because wood was extremely scarce in Ice Age Siberia. Mammoth bones were durable and abundant substitutes. However, this idea conflicts with the absence of residential traces. And even if it were true, why build something so elaborate for a temporary refuge? Ultimately, the biggest enigma is still the massive amount of material. To build a single bone tower, ancient humans needed a volume of bones that even modern societies would struggle to gather. Such a scale cannot be the work of a few individuals. It required community effort, planning, and a specific purpose, all of which challenge modern assumptions about Ice Age human cognition and organization. Today, the bone towers remain standing, challenging archaeologists, historians, and scientists alike. They prove that ancient humans were capable of achievements far beyond what we imagine, and that the Ice Age world may have been more complex and more mysterious than we ever believed. In the remote mountains of central Sulawesi lies a place where time seems to stand still, Bada Valley, home to more than 500 ancient megaliths, scattered across the grasslands like silent witnesses of a vanished civilization. Seen from above, the stones look as if they were dropped into the valley, but up close, each sculpture reveals strange features: large circular eyes, arms folded in front, and a simple yet strongly symbolic form that defies explanation. The most astonishing fact is this: no one knows who created them, when they were made, or for what purpose. There are no written records, no matching legends, and no ethnic group in Sulawesi claims to be descendants of these mysterious stone carvers. All that remains is stone, and questions that have never been answered. What do you think happened here? Who carved these silent stone figures? And for what purpose? Share your theory in the comments below. Determining the age of the megaliths in Bada Valley is almost an impossible task. Rare studies suggest they may have existed for thousands, perhaps many thousands of years, based on the surrounding sediment. But because stone cannot be dated through radiocarbon methods, the entire system becomes a blind spot in Southeast Asian archaeology. No timeline, no developmental sequence, no comparative evidence. Some experts believe the megaliths were created by an advanced pre-metal society. Others suspect they may be far older. The complete absence of tools, pottery, or large-scale settlement traces only deepens the mystery, as if the past itself deliberately erased all evidence of its origin. Among all the mysteries, nothing puzzles researchers more than the central question: why did the ancient people erect these stone statues? Many theories have been proposed, but none contain enough evidence to be considered definitive. The three most prominent ideas, funerary markers, religious rituals, or symbols of authority, each have merits but also major gaps. The funerary hypothesis suggests that the stone statues of Bada Valley were created as effigies representing the deceased, placed beside or marking the graves of high-status individuals. Their upright posture, hands folded neatly before the body, and large, widened eyes make them resemble guardians of the soul, as if assigned to protect the journey into the afterlife. However, what confounds researchers is that archaeology has found no cemeteries or burial structures of any scale that correspond to these megaliths. Many statues stand alone in open fields, with no bones or traces of burial beneath them. This absence of evidence raises a major question. If these truly were grave markers, why have all burial traces disappeared? Some scholars speculate that the ancient people may have practiced a completely different form of mortuary ritual, such as allowing bodies to decompose naturally or relocating the remains elsewhere, leaving the statues with only symbolic meaning rather than marking a specific geographic location. But without solid physical proof, this hypothesis remains in the gray zone of science, opening many possibilities but confirming none. The religious ritual hypothesis proposes that the stone statues of Bada Valley were not merely personal symbols, but representations of a collective belief system that once existed in the region. The repeated features, deep circular eyes, folded arms, and a solemn upright posture suggest that the sculptors were depicting a sacred archetype, perhaps a deity, a supreme ancestor, or a metaphysical symbol worshipped by the community. Notably, several statues and stone pillars appear beside Kalamba, the massive hollowed-out stone vats, carved with a technique still not understood today. Many scholars speculate that these Kalamba were used in rituals involving water purification or special ceremonial rites, yet the paradox is striking. There are no physical traces to support this theory. No ash, no animal sacrifice remains, no ritual objects of any kind. Thus, even though the artistic style and spatial arrangement evoke the atmosphere of an ancient religious system, the material evidence remains completely silent, as if every ceremony ever performed here was erased by time, leaving only solitary stones standing in the valley. The power symbol hypothesis suggests that the stone statues of Bada Valley may have served as markers of status and authority within an ancient society that has since vanished. Many statues are exceptionally large, some exceeding 2 meters in height, giving the impression that they were not ordinary effigies, but representations of powerful leaders or influential clans. Their spatial distribution strengthens this idea. The statues do not appear randomly, but are positioned at strategic locations, such as low hills, riverbanks, and key intersection points across the valley. This has led some researchers to suspect that the entire megalithic system once formed a kind of map of power, outlining territorial boundaries, spheres of influence, or ceremonial centers of the ancient community. The mystery deepens when noting that the artistic style among the statues remains strikingly consistent, as if the entire region was unified under a single ideological framework. Yet because no supporting cultural evidence or parallel artifacts have been found, this hypothesis remains suspended between a promising possibility and an unsolved void. What troubles experts most is this: none of the hypotheses can fully explain the megalithic system. If the statues were funerary markers, why do some stand in areas with no burial traces? If they were ritual objects, Why is there no central temple or ceremonial complex? If they symbolized authority, why does their artistic style remain unchanged over time? Unlike other power-based cultures, this mismatch makes the true purpose of Barda Valley an enduring mystery, one in which every piece of evidence raises more questions than answers. The greatest paradox of Barda Valley lies in this: to construct such massive megaliths, the ancient builders must have possessed a level of social organization and technical skill far beyond what the region's archaeological record suggests. They would have needed knowledge of stone selection extraction and the ability to transport multi-ton blocks across rugged terrain, then erect them with remarkable precision. A community capable of such feats should have left clear traces behind: tools, kilns, pottery remnants of dwellings, or signs of permanent settlement. Yet archaeology has found almost nothing. This emptiness has led many to wonder, was this a culture that merely passed through, creating its mysterious stone monuments before disappearing? Or have all traces of their existence, except for the megaliths, been completely erased by time? Modern anthropologists have attempted to glean clues from local legends, but these stories are fragmented and inconsistent. Some say the statues are ancestors turned to stone. Others claim they were criminals, punished by the gods. Still others believe they were ancient warriors sent from a distant age. None of the tales align with the archaeological scale or complexity, deepening the divide between science and folklore. Today, standing in Barda Valley, a quiet landscape where only the wind moves between the nameless megaliths, one easily feels engulfed by its mystery. Each statue seems to hold an untold story, a purpose lost, a memory erased from history. And perhaps it is this silence that makes Barda Valley unique, a heritage where even when seen with our own eyes, we still cannot grasp the reason for its existence. The hidden sanctuaries of Mount Athos form one of the most mysterious regions still existing in the modern world. On the map, Mount Athos is nothing more than a narrow peninsula jutting into the Aegean Sea. Yet for more than 1,000 years, it has existed as a separate realm, a place where time slows down, where laws, daily life, and architecture evolved along a path completely different from the rest of Europe. People call it the Holy Mountain, but to those who explore deeper, Mount Athos resembles a living archive, storing relics, rituals, and religious memories from the Byzantine era, from the world of ancient Greece, and perhaps even from older, forgotten civilizations. What do you think might be hidden behind the ancient silence of Mount Athos? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Mount Athos is mysterious not only because of its isolation, but also because it exists like a being outside of time. It shelters dozens of major monasteries, hundreds of hermit dwellings, and countless unnamed structures with no records and no known origins. To pilgrims, Athos appears to consist only of 20 prominent monasteries along the coast and mountain sides. But to the monks, that is merely the surface of a far larger hidden world. Deep within dense forests and rocky valleys lie sanctuaries that appear on no official map. The ancient stone paths leading to them have been passed down orally through generations, and some trails seem untouched by outsiders for centuries, giving the entire place the feeling of a land still living in another era. One of the reasons Mount Athos has become legendary is its complete separation from the outside world. It has its own autonomous government, its own laws, and the famous Avaton, the rule forbidding women from entering the peninsula. Although this law has existed for more than 1,000 years, there is no single officially accepted explanation. Some believe it preserves monastic purity, while others think it originates from pre-Byzantine traditions. The lack of clarity fuels the mountain's aura of secrecy, turning every question about Athos into a doorway to more speculation rather than solid answers. Deep within the peninsula lie countless secret sanctuaries, tiny chapels, stone alcoves, meditation caves, and eremitical cells that from the outside look like natural cracks in the cliffs. Hermit monks use these places to live in absolute silence, avoiding all contact with the world. There are no written records of when these sanctuaries were created, who built them, or what their original purpose was. Some contain stone walls so eroded that it is impossible to distinguish whether they were shaped by human hands or by natural forces centuries ago. This ambiguity sparks endless debate among architectural scholars. Could these structures belong to a much older occupation, perhaps predating Christian monasticism entirely? Hidden deep within the underground archives of the monasteries on Mount Athos lies a collection of documents that leaves scholars both amazed and helpless. Thousands of ancient manuscripts, from 8th century parchments and classical Greek philosophical texts to Byzantine liturgical records and priceless religious icons, are preserved in conditions where almost no one outside the monastic community is allowed to touch them. Many of these materials have never been digitized or published, and rumors suggest they contain descriptions of architectural forms, rituals, or knowledge belonging to eras that have completely vanished. Yet access is so tightly controlled that no one truly knows what secrets are being kept in that darkness. The architectural history of Mount Athos is a labyrinth of time that even the most seasoned scholars cannot fully trace. While the major monasteries still preserve records of construction and restoration through various Byzantine dynasties, everything becomes uncertain the moment one ventures into the remote hermit regions. There, small chapels, crumbling stone walls, and scattered foundation remnants hidden deep within the forest exist with virtually no documentation of their origins. Many of these structures appear older than the main monasteries themselves, built from rough stone, or arranged in Cyclopean-style masonry reminiscent of ancient Greek ruins. Yet researchers cannot determine whether they truly belong to an earlier era or are simply the work of early monastic communities using primitive techniques to survive in harsh conditions. The layering of legends, missing records, and faint archaeological clues fragments the architectural story of Athos, making it seem as though multiple forgotten civilizations left their mark on this land before vanishing without leaving a name. Archaeologists have found overlapping construction layers, foundations of older buildings beneath Byzantine chapels, or traces of walls replaced by later structures. This raises a profound question. Was Mount Athos once a sacred place or settlement for an even older civilization before Christianity arrived? No definite answer exists, only fragments and speculation. Hidden deep within the sheer cliffs of Mount Athos are the most enigmatic eremitical cells of the entire peninsula. They are constructed from unmortared stone blocks, without religious symbols, without carvings, and with absolutely no records explaining their origins. Some are perched in locations so precarious that it seems impossible for Byzantine monks to have reached them to build anything at all. For this reason, many scholars believe they may predate the monastic era and were later reused by subsequent generations of monks. Yet this hypothesis only raises more difficult questions. Who first created these stone chambers? When were they built? And what purpose did they originally serve? Records from major monasteries show multiple waves of reconstruction across centuries, resulting in a blend of Byzantine styles, Balkan medieval elements, and other architectural features that defy classification. Fires, wars, pirate raids, and natural collapses forced many buildings to be rebuilt or partially reused. Today, many areas resemble a historical patchwork, and the original form of these structures remains a complete mystery. When scholars attempt to trace the original construction timelines of these buildings, they encounter a fog of uncertainty. Scattered documents, records destroyed during Ottoman campaigns, legends mixed with facts, and oral testimonies from elder monks with no physical evidence to verify them. Even carbon dating samples failed to provide clarity because materials were often replaced or recycled throughout the centuries. This profound inconsistency makes Mount Athos feel like a living organism, continuously built, rebuilt, expanded, erased, and reshaped by time. Its architectural layers resemble geological strata, yet they cannot be read in any logical sequence. Scholars agree on only one thing: within the countless stone walls of Athos lie layers of history that no known civilization can fully claim. This lingering obscurity makes Mount Athos one of the last sacred enigmas on Earth, a place where people live among structures whose origins are unknown, whose builders are unidentified, and whose original purposes have faded into silence. And perhaps this is precisely why Mount Athos has preserved its ancient soul, because here the past never fully reveals itself. In the sunlit city of Rio de Janeiro, where long stretches of beaches meet the steep slopes of the Atlantic forest, stands a colossal rock formation that has challenged human imagination for centuries. This is Pedra da Gavia, a massive mountain of sandstone and gneiss rising nearly 900 meters above sea level. But what makes it truly remarkable is not just its impressive height, it is the unresolved mystery etched onto its face, a cliff that resembles the features of a gigantic human staring out across the ocean. Seen from a distance, Pedra da Gavia creates such a powerful impression that it becomes hard to believe nature alone could carve a face with such near-perfect symmetry. The contours of the forehead, nose, deep-set eyes, and squared jaw appear unmistakably deliberate, as if shaped by an unseen will behind the stone. Many locals believe it represents the visage of a deity, a giant, or even an ancient king, petrified and exposed to thousands of years of erosion. Meanwhile, alternative archaeology circles interpret Pedra da Gavia as a colossal intentional monument, something left behind by an unknown civilization. What do you think is this giant face? A natural formation or evidence of an ancient civilization? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The carvings found on the surface of Pedra da Gavia have long puzzled researchers, as they do not resemble any known indigenous writing system. Some fringe scholars argue that the shapes of these markings bear a striking resemblance to ancient Phoenician script, and may even be interpreted as the name of a king or a ritual dedication to the god Baal. If true, this would overturn the established history of seafaring, suggesting that the Phoenicians crossed half the world and reached South America thousands of years ago. However, the complete absence of any official archaeological investigation leaves the story suspended in debate, where bold hypotheses collide without anyone able to provide definitive proof. However, the most puzzling aspect of Pedra da Gavia does not lie in the supposed inscriptions or the human-like face. The true core of the mystery is its overwhelmingly challenging geological structure and location, which render any theory of ancient human intervention nearly impossible to sustain. Pedra da Gavia is impressive, not only for its height of nearly 900 meters, but also for its perilous geological structure, which challenges every hypothesis suggesting human intervention. The entire cliff, where the giant face appears, is sharply vertical, with some sections jutting outward, forming curved and protruding surfaces, conditions under which any form of carving would be nearly impossible. Even modern professional climbers equipped with safety ropes, anchors, fixed bolts, and years of experience classify this area as one of the most dangerous. Yet the theory that ancient people climbed to this location and carved the features requires them not only to ascend, but also to execute highly precise technical operations under conditions that even modern tools struggle to handle. To create such symmetrical features, from the eyes and nose to the jawline, an ancient sculptor, if one existed, would have had to suspend themselves on a smooth cliff face, constantly battling strong Atlantic winds and working without any safety equipment. They would have needed to shape patterns on an uneven, curved, outward-leaning surface, a terrain where a single slip could send them plunging into the abyss. They would also have had to ensure that each chisel mark remained aligned and symmetrical when viewed from the ground, requiring a level of observation, measurement, and craftsmanship undocumented in any known ancient civilization in South America or the Mediterranean. Many researchers emphasize that even with modern drilling and cutting technology, accessing this location and creating such massive features is a highly risky task. A single incorrect drill or minor vibration could cause structural fractures, collapsing large sections of the rock. Yet the giant face seems to have maintained a coherent structure despite thousands of years of erosion, only deepening the mystery. Supporters of the natural formation hypothesis believe the face is merely coincidental, a product of wind and water erosion combined with natural rock collapses that happen to mimic human features. However, critics argue that the symmetry of the elements, from the placement of the eyes, nose, and mouth to the depth of the grooves, exceeds what random erosion typically produces. Even when viewed from different angles, the facial shape remains stable, something rarely seen in natural formations, which usually distort with perspective. Large cracks near the top of Pedra de Gavia further fuel speculation. Some believe these may be remnants of entrances or hollow chambers within the mountain, possibly the tomb of a Phoenician king, as certain legends claim. Yet the extreme danger of the terrain has prevented any expedition from exploring or verifying such possibilities. The weather adds another layer of risk: dense fog, strong ocean winds, and clashing warm-cold air currents reduce visibility and weaken grip on the rock. Numerous climbers have experienced accidents here, giving the mountain an even more mysterious aura, with some whispering that an unseen force guards it. All these factors explain why Pedra de Gavia has never undergone a large-scale scientific investigation. The cliff is too hazardous for scaffolding, too steep for modern climbing equipment, and too harsh for a long-term survey team to operate safely. As a result, the mystery of whether the giant face is a natural accident or the work of an ancient civilization remains suspended between science and legend, tangible, yet unreachable, fascinating, yet impossible to decode. Beyond its perilous height and nearly inaccessible rock structure, Pedra de Gavia is enveloped in a dense layer of mystery that has turned it into the center of countless legends. Many climbers and surveyors have reported magnetic anomalies, with compasses behaving unpredictably, suggesting that the mountain may contain hidden minerals or internal formations not yet understood. Local residents speak of strange lights and unidentified flying objects, and some even believe the site is a natural energy portal where unexplained phenomena frequently occur. At the same time, bold theories propose that the mountain once served as a territorial marker or astronomical lookout for an ancient civilization long vanished. Meanwhile, mainstream archaeology maintains a long-standing silence, offering only the simple explanation of natural erosion while failing to provide any convincing evidence. The combination of unusual phenomena, dangerous terrain, and mysteries left uninvestigated has made Pedra de Gavia one of the most captivating enigmas in South America. Pedra de Gavia is both a natural wonder and an ancient puzzle, where every crack and contour may hold a story yet untold. Whether a creation of nature or the work of an ancient hand, the mountain defies all explanations, especially because of the nearly unreachable position of its human face carved into a cliff almost 900 meters high. This impossibility makes Pedra de Gavia a crossroads of science, mythology, and imagination, a mystery that even today no one has been able to fully unravel. For thousands of years, a silent stone barrier has stood at the edge of the Caspian Sea, a fortress so perfectly placed, so surgically precise in its purpose that it feels less like the work of ancient hands and more like the design of an intelligence far ahead of its time. Derbent is not just an old city between the Caucasus Mountains and the sea. It is a structure that seems aware of the land around it, as if it was built by someone who understood the entire region from above long before maps, navigation, or military science existed. At first glance, it is only two massive walls stretching into the water. But ask a single question: why here of all places on Earth? And the illusion collapses. Suddenly Derbent reveals itself as a colossal gate positioned in the only natural choke point across thousands of kilometers, a place where geography, strategy, and mystery collide. No other fortress in Eurasia sits on a location so perfect or so impossible. If Derbent was truly positioned in a location so impossibly perfect, what do you think it represents? The strategic genius of ancient people, or the trace of a forgotten knowledge long lost to history? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The strangest part is this: there are no ancient records describing any large-scale geographical survey sophisticated enough to identify such a location. Yet somehow the earliest builders of Derbent chose the single crucial point, between sea and mountains, a natural corridor only a few hundred meters wide. If you examine the entire western coast of the Caspian Sea, you'll find that only this area is narrow enough to completely block northern invaders with a single defensive line. And so the question arises immediately: who first discovered this, and how could they understand the terrain of the entire region well enough to select a location so perfect it borders on impossible? Efforts to explain Derbent in conventional terms as merely a frontier fortress built by the Sassanids become increasingly unconvincing when confronted with the geographical reality. For if the goal was simply to construct a defensive line, why choose the exact spot where the natural corridor is tightened to its absolute minimum? This is not the kind of decision made by chance. It resembles the choice of a mind capable of seeing from above, understanding the full structural layout of the Caucasus and the Caspian coastline, something far beyond the abilities of the dispersed or semi-nomadic societies of that era. Modern geo-military simulations show that controlling Derbent effectively shuts down all military movement from the north into Persia, with mountains blocking one side and the sea blocking the other. Derbent becomes the single gate through which every invading force must pass. This astonishing level of strategic precision has led many scholars to a bold hypothesis. Could there have existed a form of continental-scale military knowledge that official history has failed to record, a proto-civilization that understood how nature creates massive choke points across the landscape and knew how to exploit them in ways even large empires centuries later did not? The fact that Derbent lies exactly at the one point capable of locking down the entire region, a precision bordering on the irrational, makes it appear not merely as a fortress, but as the fingerprint of a mind far ahead of its time, a lingering question that human history has yet to answer. The design of Derbent's walls raises an even greater mystery than their location, a strategic intent that feels almost unnatural. Two massive walls run in a perfectly straight line, from the mountain slope down into the sea, forming a defensive barrier so precise that it's difficult to believe it was constructed with ancient tools. The submerged foundations indicate that they were placed during a period when the Caspian Sea's water level was much lower than it is today, suggesting that the builders either possessed long-term knowledge of water level fluctuations or they anticipated that the sea would eventually rise again. If the walls were built right at the edge of rising water, the question becomes even more puzzling. How could they determine and maintain a perfectly straight line, extending hundreds of meters into the sea, despite waves, shifting seabeds, and primitive construction conditions? Even modern engineers require advanced surveying equipment to achieve such accuracy. This level of precision has led many researchers to suspect that Derbent was far more than a typical defensive structure. It appears to be a construction guided by a mindset far ahead of its time, as if it were created by people who understood the sea, the land, and even how nature itself would change in the centuries to come. On a micro level, Derbent shows multiple architectural phases: Sassanid, Arab, Mongol, and Persian. But the deepest, lowest, heaviest layer is entirely different, rougher, older, and most importantly, unlike any known architectural tradition of the region. Some scholars argue that this is evidence that the Sassanids were not the original builders. They merely expanded upon a structure that already existed, possibly for millennia. This leads to an intriguing possibility. Derbent may be a heritage structure upgraded over many generations, with its original foundation created by a group possessing advanced military and geographical knowledge far beyond what we associate with early civilizations. Even legends deepen the mystery. Medieval texts often associate Derbent with the Gate of Alexander, where Alexander the Great supposedly erected a barrier to stop northern tribes. Though unproven, the idea that a strategist like Alexander focused on this exact spot raises questions. Did he discover a location chosen long before his time, perhaps by an even earlier culture now lost to history? One of the most puzzling issues is the scale of the fortress compared with the region's historical population. Ancient demographic studies show that Derbent's surroundings could not have supplied enough labor to build such massive fortifications. Some scholars propose that a larger empire must have been responsible. Yet the identity of that empire, if it existed, remains absent from all known historical records. This strengthens the proto-civilization hypothesis that an organized, highly capable group once operated here using manpower, engineering, and planning well beyond what we expect from the era. Beneath the fortress lies a system of tunnels and underground chambers. Many passages are blocked or unexplored. Local tradition claims these tunnels once extended into the sea as escape routes or naval control structures. Others suggest a more radical idea: these subterranean elements may be the remnants of the original architectural phase, built for a purpose we still do not understand, possibly not even purely defensive. Finally, there is its name, Derbent, meaning the locked gate. A strange name that feels less like a geographic label and more like an ancient remembrance, as if early people knew this place once functioned as a literal gate, sealed long ago to prevent something from passing through. But what invaders? Dangerous groups, or something far older that history has completely forgotten? All these elements combine to make Derbent one of the world's most mysterious fortresses. Not because information is lacking, but because too many pieces simply don't fit its impossibly perfect strategic location. Its advanced environmental engineering, its multi-layered architecture hinting at a lost past, and its construction scale exceeding the capability of known ancient societies. Derbent is not merely an ancient city. It feels like a reminder that knowledge may have existed long before written history acknowledges it. And when you look at the two walls stretching straight into the sea, you sense that this was never just a fortress. It was a signal built by someone who knew something that humanity later forgot and is only now rediscovering piece by piece. The Pedra do Inga stands as one of South America's most enduring archaeological enigmas, an enormous stone canvas, carved with over 1,000 symbols that no scholar, linguist, or cultural historian has been able to decipher. It lies quietly in the state of Paraíba, Brazil, beside a river that floods during the rainy season, but its silence is deceptive. Every inch of its engraved surface suggests that an entire system of thought once lived here. What makes Pedra do Inga truly extraordinary is not simply the density of its carvings, but the fact that the script, if it is a script at all, belongs to no known civilization, no recorded tradition, and no identified lineage of artistic or symbolic expression. It exists in complete isolation, a message whose language has vanished so thoroughly that even its purpose remains an unresolved mystery. What do you think about these 1,000 unreadable symbols? In your opinion, are they the language of a vanished civilization, or simply ritual symbols with no connection to writing? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The most striking feature of Pedra do Inga is the vast constellation of symbols covering its granite face. These are not random scratches made by river erosion or natural processes. They are purposeful, deliberate, and astonishingly consistent spirals, geometric loops, interconnected lines, humanoid figures, star-like shapes, and complex patterns that appear to repeat but not in any form that resembles a known alphabet. Many of the symbols are arranged in horizontal bands, like lines of text. Others appear to cluster around central motifs, almost like chapters in a larger narrative. And yet, for all the attempt to categorize them, the carvings resist classification. Some researchers see astronomical diagrams. Others see ritual markings, maps, or depictions of mythological beings. None of these interpretations has ever achieved consensus. This inability to decode the symbols is what elevates Pedra do Inga from an archaeological artifact to a full-scale mystery. Language normally leaves clues, patterns of grammar-recognizable shapes, parallel examples from related cultures. But Pedra do Inga provides no such foothold. Its symbols resemble nothing known in the Americas, not the scripts of the Maya, not Inca quipus, not Amazonian pictorial traditions, not early petroglyphs of the Andes. No cultural group has ever been conclusively linked to the engravings. Local indigenous groups have passed down stories about the stone, but even they deny being the authors. The result is an unsettling and remarkable conclusion. An unknown people in an unknown time inscribed more than 1,000 symbols onto one of the hardest stones on Earth, and then disappeared without a trace. The technical challenge posed by Pedra do Inga continues to perplex researchers. Granite is one of the hardest stones ancient people could work with, typically requiring iron or well-forged steel tools to shape. Yet the carvings here are smooth, consistent, evenly deep, and sharply edged, suggesting a level of craftsmanship far beyond what is expected from pre-industrial technology. There is no evidence of advanced metal tools, yet the engravings reflect the hands of remarkably skilled artisans, or perhaps an organized group following a unified technical standard. How could ancient people produce such seamless curves and precise lines? Did they use sand abrasion, heat fracturing, or specialized tools that no longer survive? The stone itself offers no clues, and the complete absence of related tools or artifacts only deepens the mystery. Even more perplexing is the state of preservation. Some carvings are so sharp and crisp that they appear far younger than the surrounding geology suggests. Normally, exposure to centuries of rain, floods, and sun would soften the edges, yet large sections of Pedra do Inga look almost freshly cut. This leads to competing theories. Either the carvings are far more recent than archaeologists assume, or there was once a technique, possibly a ritual application of coatings or treatments that allowed the carvings to resist erosion. Neither theory has enough evidence to be accepted, leaving yet another unanswered question floating above the stone. Scholars have repeatedly attempted to frame Pedra do Inga as an astronomical record, pointing to symbols resembling constellations or celestial paths. Indeed, the presence of sun-like disks, crescent-like arcs, and patterns that align roughly with star clusters gives weight to this idea. But closer analysis reveals inconsistencies. The symbols do not match any stable historical configuration of stars in the southern hemisphere. They also lack the structural repetition typical of star maps found in other cultures. Some scholars see this as evidence that the carvings represent not the sky itself, but a mythological interpretation of the sky, meaning the stone may encode cosmology, not astronomy. Alternative theories propose that Pedra do Inga is a geographic representation, perhaps a map of rivers, mountains, and settlements long since erased from the landscape. The flowing lines, swirling shapes, and repeated forms could reflect water movement, seasonal cycles, or sacred geographies. If so, the stone might function as a ritual or ceremonial marker used to guide communities through time rather than space. Still, the absence of contextual archaeological evidence leaves this hypothesis suspended in uncertainty. Then there is the possibility that Pedra do Inga represents an entire symbolic system belonging to a culture whose other artifacts simply did not survive. Tropical climates are notoriously unkind to ancient materials. Wood textiles and pigments decay rapidly. If a culture existed here, with a tradition of symbolic or written communication, carved primarily into wood or clay, those objects may have long since vanished. Pedra do Inga would then be a rare accidental survivor, a fossil of thought rather than biology, giving us only a fragment of a vanished worldview. But fragments without context remain puzzles. What intensifies this mystery even further is the lack of reliable dating. Granite cannot be dated directly with radiocarbon techniques, and stratigraphy is useless because the stone is not buried. Researchers have attempted to estimate age through lichen growth erosion patterns and comparisons with nearby artifacts, but none of these methods produce definitive results. Pedra do Inga could be 500 years old, or 5,000. It might belong to a late indigenous culture or to a completely unrecorded prehistoric society. Without a timeline, meaning becomes even more elusive. Geographically, the stone's placement next to a river adds symbolic weight. Water has played a central role in rituals across countless ancient cultures. It represents life renewal destruction and the cyclical patterns that govern existence. The location suggests that Pedra do Inga may have been part of rites connected to seasons' fertility or celestial observances. Perhaps communities once gathered here to interpret the carvings, pass down stories, or make offerings. But whatever cultural context gave life to the symbols, it has faded to silence. Some researchers believe Pedra do Inga is only a fragment of a larger complex. Erosion and flooding over centuries may have worn away parts of the original installation, leaving us with only the surviving portions. If so, the stone we see today might be the last chapter of a massive carved record that once extended across larger rock surfaces, now destroyed by the river's relentless force. The idea is tantalizing and tragic. It suggests that our inability to decipher the carvings might stem not from their obscurity, but because we are missing entire sections of the message. Pedra do Inga remains a mystery, not because humans lack understanding, but because it fits into no clear category. It is not writing, not astronomy, not ritual, and not merely art. It feels like the remnant of an intellectual world that has vanished. Its thousand symbols offer no key, no bilingual guide, like the Rosetta Stone, visible, yet impossible to understand. As long as these symbols challenge modern knowledge, Pedra do Inga will stand between archaeology and myth, a place where evidence survives but meaning fades, where a lost culture whispers through sharp carvings on enduring granite. It reminds us that some worlds disappear, leaving only traces while their meanings slip away forever. If there is any mystery in North America that makes archaeologists feel as though they are confronting a fictional tale rather than reality, it is the Tucson artifacts, also known as the Silver Bell artifacts. These heavy lead objects carved with strange inscriptions were discovered in the Arizona desert in the early 20th century and have raised countless questions that remain unanswered after more than 100 years. Not only are they perplexing in terms of material style and archaeological context, but the most shocking aspect lies in the inscriptions carved on their surfaces, a mixture of Latin, Hebrew, ancient Jewish Christian symbols, and religious expressions unseen in any other known civilization. It is precisely these inscriptions that have become the center of all debates, for they challenge the entire historical logic we currently understand. What do you think about the strange mixture of Latin, Hebrew, and religious symbols on these artifacts? Share your thoughts in the comments below. According to early reports, the artifacts were accidentally discovered by land developers near the Silver Bell region in 1917. They found the lead tablets mixed within shallow soil, not belonging to any identifiable cultural layer and not accompanied by ceramics bones, ash, or any signs of ancient human occupation. This led archaeologists to realize that this was not a true archaeological site, but more likely a place where objects were deliberately buried or placed at some relatively recent time. However, even when assuming they are forgeries, a larger question arises: if they are fake, why are they crafted so meticulously? Why use lead, a heavy, unattractive, and impractical material? And above all, why use such a complex system of inscriptions? As scholars began deciphering the inscriptions on the Tucson artifacts, they quickly realized that what was carved into the lead surfaces did not belong to any recognized system of classical Latin. The characters resembled Latin, yet the grammar was strangely incorrect. The sentence structures fragmented, and many words simply did not exist in the Roman linguistic tradition. This level of deviation was not the kind of mistake made by a poor student. It felt more like a patchwork assembled from multiple unrelated sources. What puzzled researchers even more was the appearance of Hebrew characters interwoven throughout the text. These letters were carved with accurate strokes, but they did not form coherent sentences, not even meaningful words, as if the creator knew the shapes of Hebrew letters but not the language itself. Alongside these were religious symbols, early Christian crosses, and motifs reminiscent of ancient Jewish iconography combined in ways never seen in any historical record. It is this illogical fusion of languages and symbols that leads scholars to conclude the artifacts are not merely unusual, but fundamentally incompatible with any known cultural timeline, raising profound questions about the motives and true identity of whoever created them. According to archaeological reasoning, there has never been a period in European history in which Latin, Hebrew, and Jewish Christian religious symbols merged into a single unified cultural system. Each belongs to a separate historical context. Latin is tied to the Roman Empire, Hebrew to Jewish communities, and early Christian symbols only began to appear after the 1st century. Therefore, the idea that these three elements could naturally coexist within any ancient civilization has no historical foundation. Yet their simultaneous appearance on lead artifacts in North America, supposedly from a period long before Columbus, makes the situation exponentially more illogical. This impossibility creates such a profound historical contradiction that the Tucson artifacts have become one of the most anomalous cases ever recorded. If the artifacts were truly ancient, our entire understanding of transoceanic contact in antiquity would need to be rewritten. But if they are forgeries, then the creator must have possessed broad knowledge of Roman history, Judaism, and religious iconography, while simultaneously producing errors so unusual that experts still struggle to understand their motives or actual level of expertise. The more scholars analyzed the artifacts, the more contradictions emerged. The inscriptions describe a tale of a Jewish Roman kingdom that supposedly arrived in the Americas in the 8th century, bringing kings, priests, warriors, and establishing a settlement. Some lines even list kings' names, dates, and the details of a transoceanic voyage. All of this appears through a chaotic blend of languages, clumsy Latin, fragmented Hebrew, and religious symbols carved as though the creator believed a grand epic must include all sacred elements possible. When linguistic experts examined each inscription closely, they noticed that many of the Latin passages on the Tucson artifacts appeared to have been copied from 19th century beginner Latin textbooks. Some of the Hebrew characters also resembled handwriting styles taught in Jewish schools of that same era, giving rise to the theory of a modern forgery. This idea suggests that someone deliberately created a fabricated archaeological record to invent an ancient history for the Arizona region. Yet when the most important question was raised, who would have done this, every clue vanished completely. There were no credible suspects, no tools ever found, no confessions, and no documents indicating a motive. Despite the strong suspicions surrounding the artifacts, they still cannot be definitively proven to be forgeries. One of the most perplexing aspects of the Tucson artifacts lies in their very material lead. It is heavy, toxic, difficult to carve, and entirely unsuitable for producing elaborate objects or large-scale forgeries. If someone intended to create fake ancient artifacts, they could have chosen materials far easier to work with. Yet these lead tablets were carved by hand, filled with long, complex details, as if the creator invested an unusual amount of effort for a purpose that remains unclear. The random combination of Latin, Hebrew, and religious symbols without any coherent structure deepens the mystery surrounding the creator's true intention, leaving archaeologists unable to reach a definitive conclusion even after many decades of study. Modern theories surrounding the Tucson artifacts all attempt to explain the creator's motivation, yet none of them are truly convincing. Some scholars believe the artifacts may have been produced by early European settlers, seeking to construct a mythic origin story for the land they inhabited, perhaps to reinforce religious belief or to give local history a sense of sacred significance. Others argue that the objects might be the work of an eccentric but educated individual, someone experimenting with the idea of a civilization that never existed. However, every theory encounters a major obstacle: the sheer magnitude of the work involved. More than 30 artifacts, each weighing tens of kilograms, were hand-carved with lengthy narratives describing transcontinental journeys far beyond what an ordinary person would create merely to attract attention or play a prank. This mismatch between the enormous effort required and the unclear motivations behind it is precisely what keeps the mystery alive to this day. Today, the Tucson artifacts remain suspended in ambiguity, not convincing enough to be accepted as authentic ancient relics, yet not conclusively proven to be fraudulent. The only certainty is that the inscriptions are the heart of the mystery. The irrational blend of Latin, Hebrew, and sacred symbols has made the artifacts one of the most enigmatic discoveries in American archaeology, a puzzle that defies every cultural, linguistic, and religious logic known to humankind. Meadowcroft Rock Shelter has long been one of the most hotly debated archaeological sites in the entire history of research on the arrival of humans in the Americas. What appears to be just a natural rock overhang deep within Pennsylvania's Cross Creek Valley has shaken the foundations of the Clovis First model, a framework that dominated North American archaeology for decades. What makes Meadowcroft so disruptive, almost like an academic bomb, is its extremely ancient age. Artifacts recovered from the site have been dated to between 14,000 and 17,000 years old, with some samples even older, all found within stable, undisturbed layers of sediment. This would mean that humans may have set foot in the Americas thousands of years earlier than what traditional textbooks have taught. And it is precisely this too ancient to believe age that ignited a scientific debate lasting over 40 years with no resolution in sight. For supporters, Meadowcroft is direct evidence that humans were present in North America before the Laurentide ice sheet retreated. For critics, such an age is simply impossible. What do you think about Meadowcroft's too ancient to believe age? Does it truly rewrite human history? Or is it just a scientific error? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The skepticism surrounding Meadowcroft stems from a truth the scientific community finds difficult to accept. If the site's age truly exceeds 17,000 years, then the entire Clovis First model, which has dominated North American archaeology for decades, collapses. According to the traditional theory, humans could only have reached the Americas after melting glaciers opened a migration corridor through Canada around 13,000 years ago. Yet the charcoal bones and stone tools from Meadowcroft are thousands of years older, forcing researchers to consider the possibility of an entirely different migration route, such as a Pacific coastal pathway or an early arrival before the ice sheets sealed off the continent. This leads to a revolutionary implication. If the dates are accurate, the first inhabitants of the Americas were not the Clovis people, but an independent pre-Clovis culture with its own tool-making technology, social organization, and perhaps an entire chapter of history that has never been recorded. Alongside its unusually ancient age, Meadowcroft also shocks researchers because its stone tool assemblage bears no resemblance to any known technological tradition in North America. The small projectile point's thin blades and finely flaked pieces lack the fluted channels characteristic of Clovis tools, and they also do not show the long, thinning flakes typical of classic Paleo-Indian craftsmanship. They appear to belong to a group of people who use their own distinctive manufacturing style, one that does not fit into any recognized cultural classification. This difference forces many scholars to confront a provocative question: if these non-Clovis tools are truly found within sediment layers dating back as far as 17,000 years, then who created them? And could these artifacts be the rare surviving traces of a prehistoric culture so early and so faint that it never made its way into the mainstream narrative of human history? One of the key reasons Meadowcroft has remained at the center of controversy for decades is its remarkably intact stratigraphy, which stands in stark contrast to doubts about possible carbon contamination. Critics once argued that ancient carbon, trapped in the rock or other natural sources, might have aged the samples, making the radiocarbon dates unreliable. However, independent research teams have repeatedly examined the site and consistently found that its sediment layers are exceptionally stable, unaffected by flood deposits, untouched by landslides, and free from disturbances caused by burrowing animals. More importantly, no source of ancient carbon exists in quantities large enough to create errors of several thousand years. The charcoal fragments discovered are all in proper cultural context, in the right hearth shapes, at the correct depths, and within undisturbed layers. This internal consistency has steadily weakened counter-arguments and made Meadowcroft's extremely ancient dates increasingly difficult to dismiss. The more the site is tested, the more accurate the dates appear. Another intriguing point is that Meadowcroft shows evidence of repeated human occupation for thousands of years, from pre-Paleo-Indian times well into the historic period. This is extremely rare in North America, where many sites show interruptions or destruction over time. This continuous sequence indicates that Meadowcroft was an ideal shelter used by many generations. Yet the paradox is striking. Despite long-term occupation, no human bones have ever been found. This raises puzzling questions. Was the shelter used only as a temporary camp hunting station or tool-making site rather than a permanent settlement? Did ancient people have burial practices located elsewhere? The absence of human remains only deepens the mystery. Another layer of mystery at Meadowcroft emerged when scientists analyzed pollen seeds and plant traces within its deepest strata. Surprisingly, many of the plant species found do not match the cold climate reconstructed for the period before the glacial retreat. Some species that should not have been able to survive in such an environment still appear distinctly in the oldest sediment layers. This mismatch raises a series of questions. Were the dates miscalculated? Or were the sediments disturbed at some point? Or could the prehistoric ecosystem have been far more complex than current models suggest? Whatever the explanation, this discrepancy only deepens the enigma surrounding Meadowcroft. For more than 40 years, Meadowcroft has been studied with extraordinary intensity. Archaeologists have examined every soil layer, every charcoal fragment, every tool. The most advanced dating methods, from radiocarbon testing to geochemical analysis, have been applied. Yet instead of resolving the controversy, each effort only seems to enlarge the central question: how can the site be so ancient? If humans truly existed in North America before 17,000 years ago, then human migration into the New World was far more complex than we imagined. Perhaps they traveled along the Pacific coast using primitive boats. Perhaps they arrived from unsampled populations in Asia. Or perhaps an entirely unknown migration wave existed preserved only in places like Meadowcroft. For all these reasons, Meadowcroft Rock Shelter stands as a symbol of scientific challenge, a site studded with exceptional rigor, yet still not fully understood. It reminds us that human history is never simple, never linear, and never complete in the way textbooks portray. The question of its extremely ancient age, an age seemingly too old to be true, remains at the center of all debate and continues to make Meadowcroft one of the most intriguing archaeological mysteries in the world.